Hi.
She's not. All right, can I bring the meeting to order, please? This is the Tuesday, May 14th, 2024. Planning Board, Zoning Board of Adjustment for Flemington Borough. Please rise and label for the flag salute.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Meeting is called pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act. Both adequate and electronic notice of this meeting has been provided by way of publication in the Huntingdon County Democrat and Courier News newspapers on or about February 3rd, 2024, and January 30th, 2024, and April 4th, 2024. In addition, notice of the meeting was posted at the Borough of Flemington Municipal Building, located at 38 Park Avenue, and any handicap accessible entrances thereto. Posted on the municipal website, provided to the municipal clerk, and distributed to all persons if any requesting copy of the same. This meeting is being recorded with both audio and video and may be viewed broadcast. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that are relevant to what the board may be consider in reaching a decision, and the quorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Can we do the roll call, please, Eileen?
Mayor Carroll here. Councilwoman Fasaro here. Mr. Campion is excused. Ms. Giffen
Here.
Mr. Hill.
Here.
Mr. Dashna.
Here.
Mr. Cook.
Here.
Ms. Weitzman.
Here.
Mr. Semino. Ms. Swingle. Here. Ms. DeMario is absent. Mr. Eckel.
Here.
Show.
Here.
Ms. Kaczynski is excused. We have Mr. John Galina representing here for as an attorney.
I'm looking for marriage.
Thank you. Ms. McManus here. Mr. Clerico
Here.
And Mr. Chapman is excused.
Thank you. Item 1 on our agenda is public comment for any items not currently on the agenda. Are there any members of the public that wish to make a comment at this time? Don't see any in the audience here, and I see none, no hands raised online. We'll move on to item 2, mayor comments.
So last night, the Liberty Village package passed the council. Their pilot ordinance, the plan amendment ordinance, and the resolution of the basically the contract with the developer. So I would anticipate he's going to be contacting me soon to get a date certain. Sister, he's here.
Would the ordinance then have to be referred to planning board?
I don't think so. No, it was
Okay.
already,
It's already
it already happened.
okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Nope. Thank you. All right, item 3, council comment.
No comment other than Liberty Villages.
Oh, it's ready for site plan. Review. Okay, thank you. Item 4, HPC comments. Dennis, do you have anything today?
Our HPC meeting tomorrow, so I don't have anything on that, but I just want to mention once again that we have our house tour on Saturday, June 1st from 11 to 5. If anyone wants to volunteer, you get a free ticket. So we're excited about it. It should be great.
Okay, thank you. Item 5, professional reports. I'm going to excuse Mr. Galina, but Beth, do you have anything for us today? Anything going on since the last meeting?
I don't think so. I think that warrants a board report.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you. Mr. Clerico?
No.
Nothing today. Thank you. All right, item 6 is approval of the minutes from the April 30th, 2024 regular meeting. Those were distributed to everybody. Everybody had a chance to see them. Does anybody have any comments on them or amendments that need to be made before we can vote on them? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please, from April 30th?
Moved.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Sarah, second.
Thank you. I'll take the roll call, please, Emily.
Yeah, Mayor Carroll,
Yes.
Councilwoman Fasaro,
Yes.
Ms. Giffen,
Yeah.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Joshna,
Abstain.
Mr. Cook,
Abstain.
Ms. Weitzman,
Yes.
Mr. Semino,
Abstain.
and Ms. Swingle.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, item 7 is listed as the public hearing for Worksville Road Properties LLC application 2019-05. With the agreement of the applicant, this matter is going to be carried to the June 25th, 2024 meeting. They have to re-notice for that date, don't they?
No.
It's off
Previously
that?
noticed, we would announce tonight that, if there was previous notice sent, this notice
Correct.
will be carried, but just announcing.
Okay.
That this application will be carried to the June 25th, 2024 meeting, beginning at 7 p.m. No further notice will be given.
Okay, thank you for the clarification and make sure we got that right.
When do they have to send in your documents? By?
3 weeks prior to the 25th,
So it's like.
soon. Yeah.
Soon, okay.
Soon. They agree to the date, so we can presume that they're ready, but. let's
Yeah,
wait
and they
see.
provided extension of time for the board to act to end of August.
Right, excellent, thank you. I do want to change the agenda around. Shall I ask to do it at this point? To move item, I'd like to ask for a motion to change the agenda, just to move item 13 to before current item 12, so that the party is not paying for legal counsel for all our meeting while we have our discussion.
Did you make that motion?
No, I'm asking somebody to make
So
that.
moved, go.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Wasn't sure.
I know I haven't
Oh,
got
did
that
I
yet.
hear a motion? 'Cause
No.
I was second.
I've been told I'm not supposed to make motions myself, so I was asking for a motion, so thank you.
All in favor?
All
Aye.
aye. Anybody,
Aye.
no? Being no no's. We're just gonna go through the resolutions then first, so we'll go through, we're gonna go through 8, 9, 10, and 11. So item 8 is a resolution for Chick-fil-A Inc. Application 2023-07, that was distributed and has been agreed with all parties. I understand that they have been agreed with
I
the
have,
applicant.
yeah, Kara had emailed me the revised resolution. The one resolution was accept changes.
Right.
So, does anyone else,
Do they have
comments?
Yeah, I had asked Kara to make a change on page 4, the second paragraph under number 2. It was changed, but it doesn't read right to me. It's a factual statement, but I believe it's incorrect. What's that say? Yeah. It's talking about the construction of the basically the drive-through is creating a need for additional parking, which it's not.
I thought that we didn't need it. They're actually over their parking, wasn't it?
The statement says that the project itself is under the ordinance is creating a demand for it. They're saying they meet the amount of parking, but they're saying it's creating a need for additional parking, which doesn't make any sense.
But did we clarify that later on in the resolution? Doesn't it clarify it later? Because there was definitely testimony about the parking. It was a huge thing on that site, right?
You know, the rest of, they make
get
the other
discussed.
corrections, but they're eliminating 11 spaces.
Mhm.
They have more than enough for, based on the uses they have.
Right. So you want-
Leave it-
so
leave
why-
it in there.
Is there a negative distinct thought, like the word, yeah, it does not?
Because it says that additionally will increase the working on time from 1 to 2.
Oh, they didn't word not married. Well, no, they're saying it's increasing it from 104 to 109.
That was in the testimony.
Oh,
They're not changing the square footage for.
Now,
They're not intensifying the use. They're not. I think what if I'm remembering the testimony, it was they were reducing the number of parking spaces from 109 to 104 by the creation of the lane.
mhm.
but there's 144 already on the property, and it meets the need, and there was no variance.
So that was what I thought, that
Yeah,
they
it's just,
needed less than there actually was, so therefore they weren't.
it's just a factually incorrect statement, so I don't know if there's any harm, but it just.
So can we change it with a not, as the mayor suggested, or?
Only the dot does it.
Maybe ask Kara for clarification, if the board agrees, take it out, have her take it out. I don't.
I think we need to, I think there needs to be a sentence in there, but I would, my proposal would be to say, the additional lane would decrease the parking on site from 109 to 104, and 144 parking spaces are currently, increase the, no, this is, you're right, it doesn't work.
No.
Okay.
It could just be the parking is proposed to decrease from 109 to 104. Within the
Actually,
lease area,
that's-
and 144 spaces are on the site as a whole.
Well, that's not even a true statement, because they're taking 11 spaces out.
Right.
So since it's only a factual statement, why not just eliminate the statement? It serves no purpose when you think of, it's the application that's proposed.
Describing the application, isn't it?
Right, but thing is, this describes the application in first paragraph. The lease area there where they had to go through the lease area, they worked on stormwater management. So the thing is, the additional lane would increase the parking requirement, 109 from 144, from 104, blah, 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 blah. Like, it's almost
Yeah,
irrelevant.
No, because the stormwater paragraph that's two past that talks about the elimination of the abundant space.
Right.
The only, well, actually, I think it's just the word increase. We just need to change. The additional lane would decrease the parking requirement from 109
doesn't
to
change the
104.
It doesn't.
And 144 parking spaces are currently provided on the property. That's all true.
So
So
just put it
it's
as
just the word
decrease,
decrease instead
but
of
I don't-
increase.
I don't think that's accurate because the drive-through lane doesn't have an impact on the parking requirement for the site.
On the parking it did,
Parking requirements.
Well, requirement.
but not on the requirements. It may be.
Here's the facts. The
Those are
lane,
just facts.
construction of the lane, just the facts, man. The construction of the lane, they're knocking out 9 parking spaces.
Mhm.
And then they're taking out 2 additional parking spaces to reduce the impervious coverage to address the storm. So they're eliminating 11 spaces. They're not providing any additional demand for
Right.
Right.
what, I didn't go back to look to see what the final numbers were, but what they ended up with, they ended up with 104,
144 on the
144.
site as a whole.
So why not just say, there are currently 144 spaces on provided? It's
And
just
then the
describing.
And then the paragraph, not the next paragraph, but paragraph after talks about the reduction.
I don't think I can't imagine there's nothing controversial about it. It's just wrong. So why not? I mean, isn't that a very minor change?
To read the additional lane would increase the parking requirement from 109 to 104.
No,
period.
it doesn't.
No, because it doesn't.
Decreases it from 109.
I would
Doesn't
just,
do anything.
right, my recommendation would be, there are currently provided on the property are 144 parking spaces.
Okay, let's make,
I'm sorry, I think we might also want to cite what's in the lease area.
I think
That
that's
was
the
part-
104 is within the lease area. I think that's what it's trying to say, right?
Yeah, and we need to rephrase that sentence because 104 is not used elsewhere in the resolution.
So it decreases the parking requirement within the lease
But just-
area. No, the
Requirement, the number of spaces.
decreases the parking spaces within the lease area from 109 to 104.
But it's not.
And 144 spaces are currently provided on the property. Have we got the numbers wrong? Yeah.
Yes, we could delete that paragraph, that single sentence paragraph. And to the last paragraph on page 4 or elsewhere, I just know that paragraph cites the 11 parking spaces. So we could state, so we'll say.
somewhere you want to say how many spaces you end up with, and that's more than what's required for the site.
Wasn't that
Yeah.
later on in testimony and then in what we actually, because this is just the introductory paragraphs.
Yeah, but this is the statement of findings. This is actually what
Okay.
we need somewhere in the resolution to capture the testimony about the number of spaces that are being provided, because
Right.
it
Then-
doesn't have it anywhere else.
Then I'd like to suggest that we table this to the next meeting, unfortunately, and let Cara
Figure it out.
if we really want to be really clear on that. It's not. I don't want to remove it without her knowledge or say so right now. She wrote the resolution, right?
And,
that-
and removing
would you like-
it would also, we would also want to talk with the applicants.
Exactly, we want to make sure this has been
Yeah.
checked by them also.
They
Do,
are,
was that, or do we still have time within our time limits to do it at the next meeting? Does anybody else feel strongly any other way about that, because that would be the way forward to go? I'm just feeling uncomfortable with changing Cara, not able to be here.
Yeah,
She wrote it.
the only thing it does is, I mean, it's a month, our next meeting is,
June 11th,
we don't have a meeting, please say,
4 weeks.
we don't have a meeting that the last week of the month?
One more.
No,
Oh, gosh, right.
so the only thing that it does, again, if you think of Chick-fil-A, right, we all want them to be able to build and be
Right.
successful. So I'm not sure what I guess this is a question for our attorney. What would the harm be if we eliminated that line and voted on the resolution? I mean, if it does,
If the, all right, the board would just basically have to agree, and that's the change they want to make in the vote.
But I just want to remind the board that they came here begging a favor, it was a rush, and then they delayed everything by 3 months. So it wasn't that much of a rush.
to me, that's, all I'm saying is,
No, I get it.
it's clearly something on that sentence is incorrect, and I think it's just everything in that sentence is incorrect. The 109, the 104, other than 144 spaces are permanent, probably. That is the fact,
Yeah.
right?
We're looking at the plan right now, to see what they said.
Then I would just eliminate the
Or you
erroneous
get
line.
my bill, I think it's-
Yeah, I would maybe, it's, and this did go backwards and forwards today as well, which is what worries me, is that things were, to be clear about the changes that were made to it, and I don't feel comfortable speaking for Cara on that one. Which one we had?
That should be like.
You know, if it's a 24.
The one came out at 4:57, literally just before our meeting.
What
So,
about the same carriage?
yeah, so they were talking about it all afternoon. So I don't feel comfortable, that everything that was discussed during it today got captured correctly.
That's what Bob just said.
That email sent.
There were so many backwards and forwards.
yeah, we don't have their attorney in attendance.
Exactly,
Yeah, so maybe we don't have the most current.
right. I'm thinking.
So then
That is
So then
what
we,
was sent at 3:53 this afternoon.
yeah, the discussion at 4:57,
That's what I had.
All right, so
which I don't think they made some changes. So I think, my personal view is that we should table it to the next meeting to have clarity on, what was discussed today and added today. Because that is an important statement to make sure we get that right. Right, I don't wanna have a resolution in place that doesn't have that written out, because that could be important in the future for some reason.
and especially because it's based on the lease area,
Right.
which might change in the future. It's not a tax lot that we're gonna be able to find in 15 years from now
Mhm.
necessarily.
And also one of the conditions we're imposing is documentation of the increase the lease area to reflect the new stuff, so this actually does matter.
It does matter, so, yeah, so that's my suggestion. Anybody have any objections to that?
No.
All right, let's do that. All right, let's move on then to item 9, resolution for Central Station. This is for application 2023-05, block 34, lot 7. This was also issued today.
No, this wasn't, she had been working on it, but, did not.
No, it's not, that's not ready, is it, that
No.
one?
Neither is, the next one for your
For
smart.
your smell. So there we go. We've got 3 resolutions for next town here. So that's item 10. It's tabled to the next meeting also. Item 11, escrow refund is 66 Catamount LLC, block 38, block 14. This was an informal discussion suggestion which was withdrawn by the applicant.
Yes.
So they're never coming forward. So we're just returning their escrow.
Yeah, they requested the escrow to be returned. I reached out to all of the board professionals, everything, any outstanding invoices have been paid, and they have the remaining that we can fund. Now, this was even though it didn't come to the board, it was a D variance, and identified as a D variance, an intensification. So I don't know if Marcia or Adrian can.
Which side is this?
This was Broad Street.
We never came forward.
We never came forward.
But if it's a D variance, they can't have it.
But it never came forward with an
That's
application.
that
There was
exactly.
no-
And that was the discussion, so they were denied it informal, so they never got to the board. So it just kind of,
Okay, but they're not planning on making an application.
they made a letter withdrawing any application. And then a request for return of escrow.
All right, so do we need we need a motion to return that escrow.
I'll second.
Take the vote, please, Ellen.
Mr. Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Ms. Giffen,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes,
Ms. Weitzman,
Yes.
Mr. Sabino,
Yes.
and Ms. Swingle.
Yes. Thank you. All right, so as amended, we're going to move on to that. What was item 13? Archinews. Did I pronounce that correctly? Archinews.
I pronounce it Arcunes, but I don't know how I'm pronouncing.
Ironworks LLC, application 2024-04, block 28, lot 8. This is one of our, it's a certificate of pre-existing non-conforming use / conditional use that has come from one of these things again through our construction professional. Construction. What's the title?
Code enforcement.
Code enforcement. Construction code enforcement officer, zoning officer, thank you. And it comes to us, is there appealing that decision? User, fill us in, Mr. Galena, on the, this is an unusual one, and just on the technical, we don't have a checklist for this, so just to let us know what we need to think about, yeah.
The secret is to prove that this use predated the zoning ordinance, that it's a prior pre-existing non-conforming use that would be, as they say, grandfathered in. And then, if that's not proven, you proceed with the conditional use, is that accurate?
Correct.
So you're saying that it's a conditional use in that zone, provided you meet all the conditions? Correct.
Right.
So is the
If you'd like. I can
councilwoman
continue.
and I recused from this or not? Are we recused from this? or
No.
not? We are
At
not.
this time, they're just trying to establish themselves as a pre-existing non-conforming use. If they're at the point where they need, they want to go for conditional use and don't meet all the conditions, then it becomes a D variance. In that case, that's what.
We're not asking for a D3 variance, which would be a deviation from the conditional use standard in the alternative, so both of you would be able to participate in this application. You want me to give my little spiel?
Please do, and then we will fully understand what's going on.
Sure. No, it's Steve Gruenberg, attorney in Flemington, on behalf of the applicant Arcuance Ironworks LLC. Essentially, what happened here is that Arcuance, and we're only here for completeness, but they moved into the space in February of last year. The zoning ordinance was changed in September. Thereafter, there was some back and forth with the zoning officer and construction official when they wanted to do some interior improvements. And they said, well, you're no longer permitted use. They had met with Mr. Klein and the construction official, I believe, before the zoning ordinance had changed, had entered into the lease in February. You'll recall the zoning permit application at the time that was developed sometime later in the year of 2023. So our application here for this evening is for a certification of the pre-existing non-conforming use as being a metalworking permitted use. But even if you apply the new ordinance and you don't believe that we're pre-existing non-conforming use, under the new ordinance, light industrial is a permitted conditional use in the zone, subject to 3 conditions, which we can easily meet. So what I would like to do, because you don't have a checklist, we provided you with basic information with respect to the site. I kind of know what this board is going to want to see, which is photographs, and you're going to want to know what's going on inside the building. We'll be able to provide that to you at the time of the hearing. I know Mr. Clerico wants an identification on the actual plan of what space is going to be used. And I've been before this board on this property previously, so you're very familiar with 47 Maple. I'm asking for you to deem the application complete this evening. And because you don't have a checklist requirement on it to even measure our application and allow us to move forward for a public hearing on June 11th.
I've done this in the last, in fact, just the third one now of this type of application. So I'm using a format of, from right out of the ordinance about information that's supposed to accompany all applications. And basically, there's only a few things that were missing here. Again, indicating you provide this, the location of where within the, where this tenant would occupy space within the building, some documentation as to that, that was item A9. Certification on payment of taxes is item D, that definitely should be provided. G was the certification of corporate disclosure. It was provided for the owner, but not for the applicant.
Yeah, I think it was actually on the application form, and the application form, it certified that the applicant was, that Elizabeth Teixeira is 10% owner. So I think we provided that.
But then if you could, maybe respond back at some point. So I didn't see it. I'm not saying it wasn't there. But,
I think it's actually on the actual application form itself that it had to be certified.
okay, and maybe a response back to say, yeah, sure, look here, and that's where it is. Or if it's not there, then provide it. Sort of indicating where the tenancy occupies within the building. There's a survey of the property. It's not signed or it's not sealed. The board, yeah, I said, given the nature of the application, the board could waive that requirement, but that, you know, again, be following this aspect of the ordinance, that would be a waiver. Again, there's no key map here, so you're going to get a certified list of adjoining property owners, but you have no document to compare it against, looking to see where somebody actually lives. That should be relatively easy. You subsequently provided a 200-foot list, I think.
Yeah, I can provide the 200-foot list.
You copied it, that something so that if somebody's in the audience, I live so and so that.
Tax map would be okay.
Yeah, that would be appropriate thing to utilize. And again, it's, you know, there's no schedule here on the zoning, but you say it's a conditional use, and there's 3 things you're gonna have to document. So that'll be part of your presentation.
Yeah, just so that the board's aware, the 3 conditions for light industrial are the hours of operation and site delivery shall be between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. Done. The outdoor storage of materials shall be prohibited. Done. All activities with the exception of employee and visitor parking shall be within an enclosed building. Done. Those are your 3 standards. So they're not very onerous. I can tell you, yes, we're going to comply with those 3 conditional standards. So it really is pretty straightforward.
And the last one is to have a copy of the zoning map as to where this property is located in relationship to the zone that's the same. And I don't know, Steve, you were copied on this, but there was communication from the Borough Fire Safety to the addressed to the board, but I don't necessarily see that you were copied on this.
I did get a copy of that. I understand that those are all issues that once the applicant hopefully the use gets determined, that they're going to have to file for the appropriate construction permits and provide architecturals to the satisfaction of the construction official and the fire official, but that really has nothing to do with the use issue.
I don't know if this is.
But I'm sorry, but it does. I mean, we don't know what they do there. Is it open flame? Is it welding?
I'm going to provide you with all that testimony.
Yeah, but you want us to declare that this use is okay now and.
No, that's not what we're
Just to view the application
what we
complete.
wanted to bring about that guarantee.
So and our fire marshal recommended, I don't remember what he said in there that he thought we should get before.
Well, you're basically saying he didn't have enough information to comment.
But he asked for plans to, I can't remember what he said, something about going to somebody. I don't know, letter.
He's saying that before you can issue any type of building permit or construction permit for the work that was done inside the space, that he's going to need architectural plans. So we understand that. The first, this is one of those things that's like the chicken or the egg. Okay, in order to get construction permits, you have to be certain, you need a zoning permit. in order to be determined to be a permitted use. We're arguing that in February, when we were meeting with everybody, we were a permitted use. Then the ordinance changes in September and they say, well, you're no longer a permitted use anymore.
Do you have a permit from February? Do you have a signed permit that was a
We
permitted?
don't, because the
I-
borough didn't have a zoning permit
We-
application at the time.
What I'm gonna suggest is that we, like, right, we don't have a checklist for this, but so that we can decide what we want. And I
Right.
certainly would like to feel that I'd like to see you prove in some way, shape or form, you feel that you had permitted use in February.
He included in the materials that we saw, the correspondence, the emails with Jeff Klein, the
No.
discussion with the architect. There's a fair amount of documentation about this conversation that happened months and months ago.
Right, but I agree, there's a lot of, I don't feel comfortable with it yet.
No, I really
I
don't.
understand. I certainly also want, a light industrial, like, so you're saying that you can prove that you're gonna be open certain times, but I was think the definition of what light industrial is seems to be an issue, because I'm from that correspondence. I'm reading in the subtext of it that the fire marshal, et cetera, doesn't feel that this is light industrial. And therefore not permitted. So I want some clarity, how we can, what can they give us to help us determine that?
I just want to be clear that the fire official should not be determining what is light industrial.
Okay,
It's
that's,
not his
I'm not
expertise.
saying,
Yeah.
I'm saying I have concern from the conversations, but I'm looking to you to guide me, what would ask to be able to prove that this use is light industrial, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what the fire official has asked for may be absolutely necessary for him to be able to do his job. But a lot of the items in here, I don't think are relevant to the question of the use. You know, he's asking about carbon monoxide, knockbox, architectural plans for the purpose of, somewhere in here I saw that, for the purpose of fire safety. And I'm not doubting the need for those documents in order for him to be able to certify that the building is going to be safe and up to code. But I think for our purpose, for a use determination, it's really questions about what activities are ongoing in that building. And then to the extent that we find that it might not be a permitted use, then they'll have to demonstrate, you know, that they meet the conditions.
Right.
But it's really more operational question, if you will, operational information as
Yeah.
opposed to site information.
But it's operation on site, surely we have to consider that those operations on that, in this particular site.
I'm reading of the fire marshal's letter also, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like there was a debate about whether to allow this business to go in there. And then the business proceeded to do all kinds of work without permits. So whether they needed a permit or not, I'm not sure they were gonna ask for a permit, because they can ask for permits for electrical work or construction work.
Yeah,
And they got nailed on.
I guess the problem here again is that in order to get a construction permit, you need a zoning permit. And at the time that they were meeting with the zoning officer, there was no zoning permit.
So they just went ahead and did work without getting any permits at all, including an electric.
They did do some work, and I don't know the particulars of it. I don't know to what extent architectural plans were submitted, but in order for us to move forward, both from the applicant's standpoint and the borough's standpoint, in order to first deal with the situation, you have to deal with whether the issue of whether the use is a permitted use or a permitted conditional use in the zone. And that's what this board is going to determine. Once that's determined, then I can work with the construction department in order to make sure that everything or anything that is done, has been done, or will be done meets their construction code.
Okay,
And
that's where you and I are different here, because the way I'm reading this is that the applicant didn't get a zoning permit, so it felt like no permits were necessary at all. So whether they needed one or not, it sounds like I'm not sure I can say there was a pre-existing allowed use here, because they ignored all permits, including ones that are required by the state of New Jersey for electrical work and construction work. So saying that you didn't have a process in place, to me, is negated by the fact that the state of New Jersey had a process in place for construction work that was also ignored. So it's hard for me to say that they were an okay use to go in there and that they were already pre-existing, when it sounds like they just basically did what they wanted to do.
And- And if
Sorry.
you don't believe me after you hear the testimony, and that's your feeling on it there, then we go to the second part in the alternative, which is whether this is a permitted conditional use in the zone and under your current zoning ordinance, and whether we meet those three standards. And my proofs, respectfully, I think, are going to show that yes, this type of use would be a permitted conditional use under the zone. And whether you feel that they did something wrong in the past and it wasn't a pre-existing permitted conditional use, under the current zoning, it's a permitted conditional use and we meet those three standards. And if you find that, then we rectify all the situation with the construction department. So we're here, okay? This is the way to resolve the situation for the borough and for the applicant, while maintaining a viable business within the borough. But right now, we're only here for completeness.
Right, so those things being said, I still come back to Beth and Mr. Galena advice on what documents should we ask for, in your opinion,
So I don't,
to achieve that?
I don't disagree with the items that Bob has talked about. My only distinction that I was trying to make is a lot of what they're asking for are in the fire officials memo are intended to confirm whether or not the building is not a permitted use or was a permitted use at any time. It's really whether or not the building can be occupied safely as is or without additional information. And so just for the board's information, there's a scenario out there where the board finds that this was or somehow is a permitted use, but they can't occupy the building because the building's not up to code and there's significant information and improvements that need to be made. Those two things can happen within this process, but they're two separate processes. So our focus right now is what do we need just to figure out what's going on in the building? How does it relate to the zoning ordinance?
Right.
And then the next step is the applicant may have quite a challenge in front of them to submit the necessary information to acquire the necessary permits to actually.
In order to get a CO.
Yeah, in order to get a CO.
Yeah. Okay. So other than what Mr. Greenberg has already suggested he's going to bring forward, is there anything else that we should ask for in order to prove that? Is there anything logical that we can ask for? Or does anybody on the board have anything
Whatever
they want to ask for?
Whatever you're gonna bring forward, you need to establish when you need to have that in place before you have a scheduled hearing. You said our next meeting is in 4 weeks or something.
Yeah.
Steve, do you plan on submitting the material or the testimony for a prior non-conforming use and then proceeding with a conditional use if that's found to be
Correct.
not prior? So it'll be a two-step process.
It would be at the same meeting.
So you would then also simultaneously submitting a conditional use application?
We already did. We already sought the relief for a certification of a pre-existing non-conforming use, or in the alternative, a conditional use permit.
I take it there was an application that went with the conditional use
Yep.
approval, which was submitted?
Yes, with an addendum, an amended addendum. My client, just so we know, they filed the original application, then they hired me and I redid stuff.
Does anybody on the board feel that there's anything that I need to bring?
Bob, besides the certification that your taxes are paid in full, does that include sewer water as well?
We normally, yeah.
Thank you.
And just, Steve, on your application, it identifies one of the owners with 60% interest, so it doesn't really say who the other owners are. If that's what you're referring to as a.
No, I was talking about the applicant.
That's what I'm talking about. There was a disclosure statement for the owner of the property, but the applicant is just listed as Elizabeth Textera, 60% interest.
Okay, she's the only one who hasn't working. I'll clarify.
Yeah.
So then at this point, Bob, your recommendation is,
Well, if you want to do it as conditionally complete, with information to be provided and set a date for that prior to a hearing, it would be a certification on payment of taxes, owner disclosure of the applicant's corporate, ownership thing. There's no use, it's not a sealed cert, well, recommend, they're gonna give you some sort of a key map, some sort of a zoning map, they've already given you I believe, a 200-foot list. And then whatever documentations Steve is gonna put in advance of what he's gonna present it here, whatever that might be. In relationship to the conditional use.
All right, so then just referencing, Bob, the stuff we're going to talk about later in the checklist. One of our items in there is provide serve and review letters from the fire department, rescue squad, fire marshal, and the police department. Is it appropriate for us to ask for those in this application, given the concerns that we have from the information?
We have a letter from fire.
Well, are we allowed to ask for their testimony in a hearing like that? The hearing that we would be doing, Mr. Brown?
Generally, if it's a prior non-conforming use and they can prove that testimony wouldn't be needed. If it was something in connection with the conditions, perhaps
Right.
testimony would be needed to clarify certain things and put certain safeguards in place.
We can have them as professionals, they can be sitting right there.
Like you are.
Other planning boards like Raritan Township do that, their fire marshal sits right there at planning board meetings.
I gotta be honest with you, I'm in Raritan Township, and I don't ever recall a fire marshal sitting in the,
They're on Wednesday night for the hearing on the warehouses.
maybe on that
There.
particular
So
application.
then they asked
but
them to come and they put them right up there.
It wasn't, that's not an everyday situation where the fire marshal is one of the board.
That's for prior non-conforming use. If you're showing your prior non-conforming use, that's pretty much the end of the discussion. You show you signed,
And
Sure,
but,
we did.
but what would show a fire? What would we? Oh, I just said this. What
what
would
the
we,
use of the building
would
was, what the
we see?
zoning was, prior zoning was, what the building was being used as before the ordinance was changed.
Right, but if they didn't actually, if they weren't allowed to actually exist because they were cited for certain aspects.
Well, I
of
believe
things
that
that we
citation,
can-
what I'm hearing is a citation was for just doing some work without permits.
Right, but it's fire safety work. That's my.
Yeah,
my
that
big-
really doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't really establish whether or not it was a prior non-conforming use.
Right,
So what you're saying is, we're here as a board to discuss the use, it's not a site plan. We're not hearing site plan, we're hearing use, and that's what I heard from Beth as well.
but if we, this is hypothetical, if we end up not deeming it pre-existing and we go forward with the conditional use application,
Correct.
Generally,
then we
this,
can consider those factors.
so generally, I think this board has a conditional use site plan requirement.
Yeah, I mean, we've been here before with this site, okay, where we did a use variance application with the same material that I submitted on this application. Where it's an existing building with an existing space, that everything is taking place within that space. And this is even probably less intense than what that Golden Heart
Might be
application
less
was.
intense by people, but I certainly don't think it's less intense safety wise, because I think
Oh,
by it even impacts that application. If you brought that one up, that we certainly don't want to,
Well, so I'm
end
gonna
up-
provide you
can I-
with the
can I just-
testimony
can I
about
just-
exactly what.
can I just-
Sure.
we don't want to, affect their safety of the applicant that you're mentioning, that's
See,
using
generally-
part of the space in
generally,
that building.
If you comply with the conditions, you're entitled to approval. Now, the board can make certain conditions of zoning based that are reasonably required
Right,
as conditions of approval.
yeah, that's why I'm
The key is
thinking,
the conditions.
But isn't a condition of approval all outside agencies, which would
That's right.
include the fire department?
yeah, but we can be particularly specific if we choose to be. We can have them advise us, just like we have our other professionals advise us on very specific requirements for a particular.
Don't they have
use.
their own requirements?
That's
are
why
we
they
doing
have the
what
construction department,
Yeah.
and that's why we have to meet the building codes.
It's the all codes, of course.
Yeah, I'm not sure I ever remember us saying, yeah, but what does the fire department really want? That's up to them.
Yes.
That's up to them.
And it's basically, most of it is state regulations, I guess.
In in order to get a CO, we will need to accomplish whatever building permits are required. And bring this space into compliance. That's a completely different issue than the use issue of whether this use, which I'll provide testimony about, qualifies as either a pre-existing non-conforming use as a metal working facility or as a light industrial under your current zone. So that's really what we're here for. I can give you that basic information based upon the completeness that's been recommended, even though you don't have a checklist requiring it. I want to give you that information in order for you to feel comfortable. But I don't respectfully, this board doesn't usually get involved into construction code issues. That's why you have a construction code official. That's why we need to meet all of those requirements. This is just a use issue.
I would respectfully agree or disagree on that.
Yeah, how do we prove prior non-conformance use?
So I have to bring in, testimony or records to show what was going on the site prior to the ordinance change.
So we would be able to see, for example, prior waivers, we'd be able to see prior use that would have fit, like you could, another.
Documentation and testimony to show that it predated the ordinance. The use predated the ordinance.
Okay, and so we actually just did this, if you think, forget if you were sitting in on the dental application.
Yes, I looked at forward because that was very detailed about why it was, how far back they went, all the work that they've existed here since 1997.
Yeah, so they
Right.
pulled all of their history, they
Yeah.
wrote, and so what they submitted was, in that case, borough documentation as well as some other additional documentation that I guess the owners had created over the years to demonstrate that that particular building had been the office use or dental use, depending on the time period, since 1960s or so. And so they had, official documents at different points of time that demonstrated the use at this specific time, when we were comparing that to the ordinance at the time of the change, essentially. And that's sort of a format for what we're going to do with Mr. Gruenberg's client. We're going to ask, what documentation do you have that demonstrates that that particular use was occupying that particular area prior to the September 2023 zoning ordinance change? And if the board is satisfied that that documentation shows that the tenant occupied that space at that time, then you're basically obligated to indicate so through granting a certificate of a non-conforming use.
Now,
And if you don't agree with that,
And then.
my alternative argument is that under your current zoning, it's a permitted conditional use subject to those three conditions, which I read into the record. So respectfully, I think we get there either way. And we'll provide that proof to you.
We certainly get to a discussion. Either way, we'll be having a discussion about the meat of it. Like, currently, we just want to identify what we want, because we don't have a checklist.
and because we don't have that type of
We
documentation.
want to make very clear what we want. We don't want to come to that discussion and say, actually, we want you to provide this, and we need to tell them today.
Yeah.
So that's what we need to do. That's what I'm asking, that's what I'm asking everyone to say. What do you need them to bring to this meeting, the next stage?
And to be fair, the board will have to base its decision on the documentation so in terms of the certificate of non-conforming use, the board will have to base its decision based on the documentation and testimony provided. And so there's no specific checklist for this, and frankly, the documentation that would be necessary is going to be different for every certificate that's applied for, because the timing, the circumstances are going to be different. So it's really incumbent upon Mr. Gruenberg and his client to submit the documents and or provide the testimony that the board can rely upon, but it's not something that I can identify now. I mean, submit the little forms and documents that show the tenant was there, but exactly what those are not, it's not listed in municipal land use law. It's really based on what's available and what's appropriate for the circumstance.
We already have submitted a lot of that documentation, as Mr. Dashna pointed out, including, I believe, the lease agreement that was entered into in February showing that the space was leased, and certain other documentation. So I'll review the matter to provide you with further proofs about it, but I don't understand what our burden of proof is.
Okay.
This is the technical, my head wants to blow up over this too, just thinking about it. but it's for you, for Mr. Galina. So if they went in February, they couldn't get the zoning and occupation, a permit to occupy, right? They didn't get one. They entered into the lease anyway. They did construction in there anyway. So they really weren't approved by the borough. How are they then an existing use?
Now, you can have an existing use and decide to do renovations. Right, but
But if they weren't an approved existing use because they never got an occupancy permit.
if they predated the ordinance, if that use predated the ordinance change, then they are an existing non-conforming use. If somebody wants to go and do renovations on something that's either an existing, pre-existing non-conforming use and they don't get permits, that's a violation.
I think the
It
most
all comes
important
down
is
to
that
what
they
what's
didn't
going
have,
on
they didn't have.
on the site, you know, at the time the ordinance was changed.
But we're,
I think the mayor's trying to, forgive me if I get it wrong, correct me, but if they don't have, if they never had a CO, then they never were existing, because they weren't
That's
actually
right.
officially a use.
If they were never officially allowed in there,
That's what
if they were never officially allowed in there and they went in anyway, how can they say, and this is hypothetical,
But I'm just looking
No,
to.
how do they
I
say
understand
they
what
were
you're
a
saying, yeah.
pre-existing use when, as far as we were concerned, they never existed there?
If a CO and a permit were required and they never got those things, technically then they were never a valid use.
Okay.
That's
So
the applicant
that's-
deals with that.
The applicant,
My
that's.
brain's like, there was something.
And that's why we have a public hearing, so that
Right.
we can ask all these questions, present all the testimony, and whether you agree that it's a pre-existing non-conforming use or not, or whether you find, well, if it's not a pre-existing non-conforming use, it meets our current ordinance, the use as a conditional use, subject to those three standards. That's why we hold a public hearing. And, you know, I don't want to debate all of those issues tonight because I don't have my witnesses here to present that testimony. I haven't marked anything into evidence. You might not agree with it. I understand that.
I'm just trying to understand.
But we're only here for completeness tonight.
Again, this is just.
So-
And there is no checklist.
And what we just spoke of, that was said, although we don't usually have those people here as our professionals, but to advisors, would it be appropriate in this situation, Mr. Lehman?
I've never
To
seen
have-
outside officials come in for a,
Well, we haven't, but we're all, is there a reason we can't do that? Or
I don't
would it
know
be
if you wanna-
appropriate?
the thing is usually you get correspondence from them. with
Okay,
their-
so I can ask the
their
correspondence.
Recommendations, et cetera. but,
I disagree. We can have them here. We are allowed to invite in any professionals we want from the borough. So if you want to invite the fire marshal or the construction officer or whoever it is, chairwoman, you have the right to do that.
Mhm.
So just because we don't normally do it, doesn't mean we can't do it.
Yeah,
Mr. Stratton's not here tonight.
I wouldn't consider it in other situations, but I feel with the nature of what I've read so far, I'm not clear and I feel I need guidance on that.
I guess what I'm asking you, Mr. Lee, so long as our construction officials are only talking about the use, not the fire suppression system, not anything that's outside of this board's jurisdiction. We can only be talking about the use. We're a land use board. We can't talk about, oh, but you have to have this special ceiling tile, whatever it is.
That's all I'm saying. I'm looking to get clarity on what the situation is. Mr.
Well,
The applicant will have his
with his
witnesses. I almost feel that they're a witness. To support that as
Yeah,
well.
fire marshal was there from.
So that's something I will probably be asking that to happen if they want to be present to help us, or they want to provide written testimony beforehand. That. I will
Well, not
be
written testimony, but I guess they're,
written, and look,
review of the-
letter, they could do it by letter if they choose to. I certainly will be reaching out to do that. So does anybody think, anybody else, anything that they want to ask this applicant to go forward, to bring, or, to make sure our list of, because this effectively, then we make this list and then we decide it's complete, given that you give us this list of things when you come to the public hearing, is that correct? Because we don't have a checklist.
will the board do it that way, provided that those list of items are timely submitted?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I guess what would be done is that, the board can set a hearing date,
Mm-hmm.
but it would be conditional upon getting the submission of the items that Mr. Clerico has suggested. And then the applicant would notice for the hearing.
Well, do we have to deem it complete before we can talk about dates though, do we? Am I correct?
You could give him a date this evening.
Right, yeah, we usually.
We ask you to deem it complete.
Or would you
condition
want
upon
to,
us
would you
providing
want
that
to
information.
receive those items first and deem it complete, and get it? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I was gonna suggest that you, like we've done in the past, do a motion to deem the application complete contingent upon us providing the information that Mr. Clerico identified at least 10 days before the public meeting, and we hold the meeting on June 11th, I think is the date.
3 weeks, why am I thinking 3 weeks?
Sorry, the notice of hearing would be, it's a 10-day notice of hearing, the
Right.
materials have to be submitted 3 weeks ahead.
Right,
The
materials,
official
the
application.
materials would have to be submitted to like the professionals and ourselves for review in sufficient time. Which gives you, being as our next meeting is June 11th, did I get that right?
Is that June 25th
Is
meeting?
it June
No, June 11th.
June 11th? Steve, can you get everything in it?
Yeah.
That's what's the.
14.
17,
Week or so.
17, 11. You got 4 weeks, so that.
1 week, and then. Okay.
I guess at this point, if the board wants to make a motion that they would conditionally deem it complete upon submission of those items. The hearing date would be June 11th. Of course, those items would have to be timely submitted. The applicant would be noticing at his own risk if those items weren't submitted.
Understood.
Yeah, I just wanted to say to the board, we've been down this rabbit hole so many times. And thanks to Mr. Gruenberg pointing out 3 times tonight that we don't have a checklist. We are now in the process of creating the mother of all checklists. And we have in other applications complete that let us down repeatedly. And we all kind of talked about we weren't going to do that anymore. Just putting that on the record.
But you never did that with me.
So,
Because
I'm
I've always-
never accused of you, Mr. Gruenberg.
But they know, and they know that when I promise to do something, I do it, and I get the material that you want, and they've always been satisfied. That's why I've got my approvals. Because I provide that information. I'm sensitive to the board wanting information.
Our alternate board, and I'll call for anybody to comment on this then, our alternate, given the minister's statement, is that we wait until our checklist is complete and approved before we move forward with.
We can't wait.
I'm not
We
sure
have a
that's-
timeliness to act, we're not gonna, the checklist requires an ordinance, we're not gonna.
Right, but we take that under consideration. And we respectfully request that you acknowledge, appreciate the fact that we don't have a checklist and we are taking this on trust on what we're on moving forward, that we won't have, it won't linger, let's put it that way, as other applications have done.
That's why I gotta be honest with you. I mean, you're correct. I do point out all the time that you don't have a checklist. I could be a jerk and say, you don't have a checklist, you can't ask for anything. I've never done that. I've always said, board, what are you looking for? I'll get you that information. You can't beat me over the head with it because you don't have anything to beat me over the head with in terms of the checklist. But I'm gonna get you the information that you need in order to act favorably on my application.
Time the application is made, you can't let it. Have a checklist and say, well, now you have to do all this.
No, but, well, I just want to make sure that we have everything we need at that public hearing, so we can do it calmly and
You don't have to
efficiently.
submit everything.
And that's
so
why
it's
I'm
fine.
doing
That's,
We can
Still
still
not
have.
care about taxes and stormwater being paid up. That's important.
Yeah, just,
Yeah.
again, reciting a section of the ordinance that specify, even though it's not a checklist, it's a section of the ordinance that says this is what you need for any application submission. And as I just copied and pasted this into the memo that I sent, it's item, we talk about item A9 on here, item D, item G, item L, 4, 6, and 9.
And
Although it's not in the form of a checklist, we do have a list of items that we require, isn't there? So let's get some work. Yeah, is that correct? Would you agree with that?
I would agree that you have an ordinance section, but if you really want me to get into the legal argument
No,
about
I
it, I
don't think we
can
would
say
get
that
into
the
that.
municipal land use law requires a checklist, and if it's not, there isn't a checklist, you can't hold my application for not providing that information in order to deem it complete, that you need to schedule a public hearing. I also realize that you're gonna want to see things at a public hearing in order for me to convince you to act favorably on my application.
Mhm.
So all I'm asking for is tell me what you want to see.
Right.
And I'll get it to you because you don't have the checklist. And let's hold a public hearing so I can answer the mayor's questions on all those issues.
Well, hopefully from our discussions, you have a really good feel for what we're looking for. We've identified through Mr. Clerico's notes and notes we've made today in our discussions, what we're looking for. So can we make them, if somebody can make a motion, do you want to make a motion?
My recollection is that the motion would be that the applicant will timely submit the items just reviewed by Mr. Clerico. They'll be timely submitted to the board. The board will schedule a public hearing for June 11th, provided that those items are timely submitted.
And the time limit the board establishes 3 weeks.
Yeah. So would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll move that. I'll move that.
Anybody want to second that? Okay, and then can we call the roll on this one, please?
Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mr. Dashna.
Yes.
Mayor Carroll,
No.
Councilwoman Fasaro,
Abstain.
Ms. Giffen,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes,
Ms. Weitzman,
Yes.
Mr. Semino, Ms. Swingle.
Thank you all very much. See you on June 11th.
Okay, we'll see you then before June 11th.
Take care, everybody.
Right, so we'll put that on the agenda for June 11th. Thank you. All right, so this is the fun part. Back to, I guess this is now the new item 13, moved around old item 12, discussion of the planning board checklist.
Yeah, maybe we pick them up.
I would do it all.
Don't, I'm sorry, don't we all have them anyway?
Yes.
I do not want any paper, no paper.
I got it here, I'm good. Thank you.
But if you can have them, hopefully people did have time to look through and ask some questions. I know we received, Bob, we received several
Karen
messages.
has submitted,
And
and
submitted some, and Dennis
Dennis submitted some.
submitted for an HPC related comment on that. So this is our time then to go through. Do you want to summarize what's? Yes, please.
Easier to go through each item, and
Mhm.
if somebody has a comment on the item, you can hear the comments and make changes accordingly.
Exactly.
Do we want to take a quick break before we get into this? Because this could take a little while. Should we do that rather than taking our break at 9? Does anybody want a break or are we all good to go? But can you reintroduce you?
Oh, Wendy, my boss.
Wendy.
Thank you.
Well, let's just go then. I was just offering if anybody needed. Yeah, let's go. So, let's go. Yeah, right. Mayor's ready to go. Let's go. Thank you.
Right.
Oh, Mr. Galena, do you want to stay for this or do you want to leave or do you want to stay with us? You're more than welcome.
I would rather us not have a meeting about it.
Perfect. Okay, no
Please hold
problem.
it.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, sorry, Bob.
All right.
Floor is now yours.
Maybe we ought to start with what applications we're covering here. So we have the normal subdivision, minor, major, and final site plan, minor, major, preliminary, and major final. The 4 different types of variance applications under the municipal land use code. I threw in here for a sign plan. That's a separate subcommittee that hears that. I don't know if you really want that on your checklist or not.
I don't think it's a separate thing. It supports any of the others, doesn't it, if they have a site? So I don't think it needs a separate column, do you?
There's a separate check, there's a separate application.
But they
Not
don't come to the
really,
whole
it's
plan.
officially,
Yeah. It
No,
does.
it's not something that comes, I don't believe it's something.
If, because an applicant has the right to say, you know what, I'll do signs later. Or they might say, well, I'm going to do signs now, which in that case, then they would submit signage with their application, but it's not up to the board to say, it's almost like an optional, so then why have it on the checklist?
Yeah. And this is getting a bit crowded as it is, so.
I don't think this checklist, I think a good try. I think this checklist needs that.
So we take that column out.
I think so.
So, of the
Anybody
sign-
feel strongly should say?
No, I think,
No.
no. it's fine.
And then we threw in here an informal review for a concept. Now, we can go through and look at what's gonna apply to different types of applications, and Kara had some comments on that, and Judy definitely had some
Yeah.
comments on that as well, so, basically an application form and a fee is essentially required for any, any kind of form of.
All right.
Yep.
Can I just, I'm sorry.
I just have a quick question on the colors of this. So where you have like required documents and submitted with application and then application is refused, and then it says with separate computation, calculation, that's just for variances. Is that just for variances because it's red?
No, no, so the color,
I'm sorry. I guess
correct me if I'm wrong. The color code here is that the blue, is text, additional text. If you recall, I had that other submission that had the two checklists sorted together. So what's in the dark black font is essentially is in your current checklist.
Right.
It might be reorganized in different locations, but it's from your current checklist. The blue is in your current checklist, but it's additional language to be added to it. And the red is like a whole separate thing that's not in your checklist. The red and the blue is a little bit of a distinction, but you want to
Okay.
consider it. But
No, going directly to. Okay, thank you.
Elena, do you have a copy of that? Did you take one? We have a spell on here. Yeah, yeah.
And Eileen, did you send out the one with the different color text?
We did. Yeah. Last time. Wait, for last time.
Oh, for the last time.
Yeah, it was the last time, and then also, today.
the idea is to read what the composite is, so just that you want to have some sense of where it came from.
This-
Section. So there's this one, before the last meeting, was like 3.
Go back to the,
I'm gonna go back to the first slide.
yes, but the main first one's got the color.
Yeah, sure, why not? Let's not even follow. I've just got my notes. Right, Bob, we're gonna get ready. We sat them down now.
I'm sorry. I was overthinking it.
Any other little thing, legend?
My hand is blocking it.
So I guess the question would be, is there any additional types of applications we want to have covered?
Should we include a certificate for non-conforming use?
Is that considered a separate, can you put it in the same category as like a C or a D?
I feel like, given the discussion we just had, we should put it in here. And maybe it just simply takes the place of the sign plan.
That's fine.
I mean, in terms of the column organization.
Would that cover all of the things that we've had to deal with recently? Is that the type they are, all those appeals, the appeals?
A separate one also though,
For appeal,
Appeal.
bifurcated use only.
wouldn't that be a use variance?
That would be a use.
That would fall under just the,
Yeah.
that would just fall under one of the variants.
Respectfully, as the planning board pledge never to do a bifurcated application. There's one thing to that.
I thought we did it for,
But yeah, but
What did you call it? A certificate of what?
so I was gonna recommend, where sign plan, well, I don't care about the format, I'll leave that to Bob, but we should add certificate of non-conforming use and perhaps an appeal, zoning officer's appeal. They probably require largely the same information. I don't know, I might change my mind as we go through the checklist.
I think it would be good to identify that this came from an appeal somehow, would it? Are we supposed to, or is that not supposed
It's
to be
just, it's
identified?
one more application, one more agenda item or an application that somebody's gonna make to the board, and that they're gonna try to figure out what they need to submit. We're gonna try to figure out whether or not we're happy with what they've submitted. So in my mind, notwithstanding the busyness of the checklist and all the information, I think it would just simplify things and avoid tonight's conversation if we just had it in here.
Yes, I agree. We need to capture that so that we cover all these things that might come forward to us on here. Like I say, we're doing the mother-in-law checklist. It needs to be the mother-in-law checklist.
So we'll have a column, that'll be for certificate of non-conforming use / zoning appeal.
I think so. Like I said, I might
There's a
change
lot
my
of
mind as we
comment
go
out
through it,
there.
but yeah.
And Bob, based on the earlier comment on a bifurcated application, we don't have the right to say we won't accept a bifurcated.
I don't think you do. I think that's something that Mr. Lang.
Right. So the thing is, so would not be the same as an A, B, C, or D.
Oh, it would be a VD.
It would be,
variance.
it's just a bifurcation.
If they're,
If that's all they're applying for, then D is the only column. that's applicable.
Oh, I got it. I
it would
got
be
it.
major, minor.
I got
So they
it.
want to see if they can get variance.
Once you get down to the major minor, then checks, I got, I'm sorry.
Eileen, other questions? Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but if we're changing all of and adding different, applications that we might want to, and it might be time for another discussion, have fees that are, look at the fee schedule.
I
Because
was.
I know there's, you know, fees, non-fees, and that's a whole nother animal.
Is that another, like, almost like.
That's a different ordinance, that's a different ordinance.
When you adopt this checklist, there's gonna be things in here that are contradict stuff that's in the text of your ordinance. It's gonna have to get modified. And you can certainly do the fees at the same time.
The fees then,
One package of ordinance. for the same
Yes.
section.
but yeah, let's make a note that we have to do that then.
Just start with this, because this will tell you
Yeah,
what
we
it is you
wanna-
want, and then you can go look at the ordinance and see what contradicts what you
That's
currently say, and adjust that or eliminate that, whatever.
And is there anybody that would sign up for where it says informal review? Not a D, however you put that, because I do think there's some misconceptions about, you know, let me just come in, if they know they need a use variance.
You don't do it for.
Well, we have done in the past, the person sitting there said, oh, look at the use variance.
Yes, but as soon as we do that, we
We
cut
stop, right, but again, I mean, where does it say, does it say anywhere? that-
Because usually what's supposed to happen is that they have a conversation with the code official. Code official's like, usually is pretty good about figuring out, is this a D or not? Oh, you might want to do an informal, fine. Then they talk to Eileen. And Eileen asks more questions about what's going on.
Well, yeah,
And then
and
usually
they should be getting, now that we have a zoning permit application, that is great, because, our zoning office can take a look at that, identify what the relief. that
So you don't think we
necessary.
need to remind?
Well, we just need those procedures.
Okay.
It might be worthwhile to have something in our application right now. We have like a procedural sheet in the beginning of it. It might be worth to revising that and,
We want to make sure that that matches
and
what we're.
yeah, all of the steps that they should do if they're looking to do anything in the borough.
And
the step that they should take.
Those people who we're all working together, pulling the same way.
That's
Yeah, we're not fighting against each other, it's not, a war, it's, all of us together.
behind the same.
Yes, going in the right direction. Hopefully. All right, thank you, Bob.
Okay, are we okay with 3 weeks for submission?
Yeah.
Yes, 3 weeks.
So the first thing then, again, this is split between documentation you need to submit with an application. And the second part is information that you need to incorporate on the plan if that plan is required based on it. So the first segment here, again, we did the first section in the alphabet, we did the second section in so A is application and escrow fees with separate computation calculation.
Would that then refer to that speed schedule we were talking about, we were saying?
I mean, you could start referring to sections of the ordinance, but of course, you try to make this too complex. You in more detail,
But the note-
change the ordinance and you gotta change your checklist or something.
But the note to be taken now is that we have to make sure that we have separate computation.
Yeah, the applicant gives you a copy, yeah, I'm fine for a use variance, I have this fee and this escrow, so that.
And that's required for everybody, including the new category of zoning appeal.
Any application would require. Someone might be simple, yes. Like this one, you sort of relatively simple. Second one is administrative, I think we settled on 5, right?
Yeah.
So 5 copies of the completed application form and 5 copies of the completed checklist. But the application form and checklist will come, but it's only gonna.
Well, all documentation that they're going to, any supporting documents. as well. Checklist, application, plus all, I mean, if it's photos, whether it's it's with the exception of possibly the stormwater management documents, because those are.
Well, let's make a note of it. We might be able to stick that in here.
Yeah.
And supporting documentation. C is applicant's disclosure statement if filed as a corporation as required, reciting the section of the statute. A list identifying required or requested variances, including narrative explanation outlining the basis for the requested relief. Is that too much?
Yeah, I was gonna recommend that we strike the explanation outline the basis for requested relief. I find that, when those items are submitted, they're often, not complete, you know, so let me share my experience. When I testify before other boards, I have that item on checklist, and I am really reluctant to provide that information so far in advance of completeness because There's a chance that they don't necessarily have their final planner selected because sometimes the planners will ask for an added, sometimes they don't realize they need them. And the planner may not have had the the application might not be, the applicant team might not be, working close enough yet for the planner to be able to put together their explicit arguments. And also, I have to say, as the planner, I never want to share that with the board in advance. And so I think that the board is unlikely to get something that's particularly helpful because you just, as the person doing the testimony, especially for controversial application, you don't necessarily want to lay out all your arguments in, 45 days in advance.
Who added that in? Bob, why, like,
It came from the other checklist.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that the board is gonna get a particularly meaningful document from the planner that we're gonna be able to rely upon. Because those that I've seen in other towns, they submit something and it's sort of the standard recitation of positive and negative criteria. And then when the planner, the actual planner, potentially, the different person actually stands up, their arguments are much more detailed, potentially just frankly different. And so,
So here we're just asking for a list of the variances.
yeah, I think a list of the variances is absolutely
In
necessary.
outline form only. or something.
Yeah.
In outline, or just a list.
And they're also
Yeah, just.
adjusts their
Just to
testimony.
make
based
a
on
point,
prior
the red
cases.
came from the town of Clinton.
Yeah.
They use that as the basis of this.
Can't justify it.
Yeah.
And
Most
I
of them
mean,
without
I'm
the
talking this
professionals.
questions.
Just figure it out, it's not.
So the narrative explanation is what we're going to expect from the public hearing, but we
Yes.
don't need it.
Yeah, you're gonna
for
get that verbally.
Completion, right?
Yeah.
So we
So
strike, we're
just
gonna strike
identifying
that
the-
red one.
Required or requested variances period.
So did that go, so looking at the columns, that already is not checked for informal review?
Well, yeah, let's look at that.
We just, yeah, because we should be looking over there too, to see what we want required in these new columns, which is zoning appeal and sort of certificate of non-conforming use.
I guess informal review is empty because they're coming to find out what we might, what was just.
Yeah, a lot of times we're
which
just
they
discussing
might
whether
be.
this is conforming
So
or
we're
not.
not gonna ask them to
Whether I need that.
identify that first. That's really the idea there.
The purpose of a concept, flush out and stuff like that, so.
So it looks like Bob, A, B, C, and D is required for all of these. So they should be required for the two new columns as well, right?
I don't know if the appeal, does the appeal need to have a list of variances?
No,
Okay,
nor would a certificate of non-conforming use.
but it does need the applicant's disclosure statement. Right?
Yeah, you want to have an application, you have a fee,
and
you
then-
want to know who the applicant is.
And the certificate of non-conforming use. We want the applicant's disclosure statement.
Yeah. Do we need that? Do we need that?
They're not checked now.
And thinking about this on D,
It wasn't-
identifying required requests, you don't need that for a major final subdivision, because you would have already gone through that with. So you wouldn't need it there.
Is it
Which
true?
letter, Bob?
On D, you wouldn't need it for a final major subdivision,
Right,
because you already would have had it, that
Right.
follows the preliminary. You wouldn't need it for a preliminary, you wouldn't need it for a minor subdivision. On site plans, major final, again, technically, you can't get the major final unless you went to major preliminary, so. I suppose you
But a
could,
lot of the applications come through as preliminary and final, though.
true.
I mean, I know it's not granted until, but that's how that's how they come to us.
Right. You can leave it or not, but you would have had it already, you required under one, you're gonna get it under the other one. So.
It's cumulative as you move, right?
Well, prelim and final are cumulative, minor
It's
is
separate. Moving on to E, again, certification from the borough, Flemington Water and Sewer Departments that sewer charges under late fees, interest or other assessments are paid to date.
we want that from everybody.
It is.
not an informal and not a, do we need it for a?
Well, it depends what the appeal is for. The thing is, this appeal column almost covers any of them because
Yeah, we can,
we don't know what level of an appeal could be anything, right? It's not true. Or would it, no, it would be minor.
I don't know, that's why.
Right.
That's the same, they owe us money, they should be paying up before they come.
yeah, so we'll put it for any application.
I mean, they could always request a waiver if it's not relevant.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the way when we want to go forward with it is we expect more and they can ask for waivers if they, because that's why he's got in here on the columns on the right, waiver requested for the grassy ridge identified, and then we get to decide if we agree with that for a particular case, by that case basis, yeah. Rob, just going back before we go too far, because we've changed that sign plan to say appeals. Item C, we would check that, wouldn't we? On an appeal, I just want to fill that in for myself, is that right?
E, I put E across the board. You need E for it.
I meant C, because item C, for an appeal, we would want that. Just because I want to put it in just because we don't know
Yep.
what kind of appeal
Yep.
it is at that point, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay, thank you.
yeah, because that C is only if you're filing as a corporation.
Yeah,
So, yeah, that would go across the board.
so we're up to, G, F.
E, F, certified, now you would only need a certified list if the application requires notice. So major final doesn't require notice, right? So we get rid of that. Major preliminary would, minor would,
Subdivision does.
minor
Minor
subdivision.
subdivision, no.
Unless there's a variance.
Well, again, it's the variance part.
There can be an ordinance, the town can have an ordinance that you have to notice it for minor subdivision, but generally it's not required.
Keep in mind, these are not mutually exclusive. You could have a minor subdivision that also requires a variance.
Well, then you're
Then you have to
Yeah,
notice for the variance.
so it might be the variance aspect that requires a notice, not the minor subdivision.
But a 200-foot list is always nice to know if somebody needs to be recused.
So we don't need it for a zoning appeal, and do we need it for certificate of non-conforming use?
If you need it for a certificate of non-conforming use, you have to notice for that, but not for the appeal.
That's a situation where we're gonna use one column to cover both.
Yeah, but we could. Again, this is where they can request a waiver.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can request a waiver. if they-
all right, so we'll throw that one in there,
Yeah.
but we'll take it out of final major.
Final major.
And minor, do we need it for minor or not?
For minor site plan or subdivision?
Subdivision.
Does the borough have an ordinance that you have to notice for minor?
We rarely.
Minor subdivisions.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have it.
And
For subdivision.
that leaves it. That's it, they go exist.
Mm.
And we're not requiring it for minor site plan. Again, if there's a variance, that's gonna trigger. So any of the variances require it, informal wouldn't require it. Sign escrow agree, you want that for anything. H, completed Form A and the Borough of Flemington Water and Sewer Utility Board. Now, does that conflict with D?
No, it's different.
They're different, okay?
One is
Completed,
them-
right, one's
yeah,
fees, one's
yeah,
right,
form,
yeah.
right.
Certified form of the Borough of Flemington Water and Sewer Department. We don't need that for a major subdivision final, but we need it for preliminary, we need it, those agreements need that for anything else, right?
We need it for minor subdivision.
Well, yeah, not that we'll ever see one, but yeah, if somebody's gonna subdivide property, you might need sewer connections, you want.
And we do need it for the certificate of non-conforming use, we need that too.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, are we talking about Form A
Yeah,
for the certificate?
yes, because like, so the one that was done for the developmentally disabled day center, you're adding 20 people into a building that only like had 6 or 7 before. So the Form A is important because it calculates sewer use.
No, I get it. I just mean that was for a use, that was for a new use. For the dental office, for example, they would have already had their sewer allocation to the
We need
property.
it more for existing non-conforming.
Right,
This is non-conforming, wouldn't it? But
but that was a zoning appeal. That wasn't the non-conforming use.
the group home was a variance.
The group home was a variance.
That's
right,
But
yeah.
it covered under the
Would
variance.
be kept under the variance.
Okay, yes,
They
but
would have had
but
to
the
provide
dental
what the
office
dental would
was
not.
a zoning appeal.
Yeah,
We don't need the demo. We don't need to schedule it like the demo. office.
No,
No.
no, not Form A.
also, they won't apply to the certificate, to the zoning. Right.
Right.
I is, now again, this is wording from the town of Clinton, you probably don't use this wording, but, will serve, and review letters from the Borough of Flemington Fire Department, Rescue Squad, Fire Marshal, and Police Department. That's, will serve is not a terminology you use in your ordinance, Clinton does, so if you want to,
I don't think, I mean, for me, it's like, it's not about the civil service, it's about their comments. We would want comments from, not necessarily, well, the rescue squad, I guess, for housing development, but, you know, I would like review letters, not the word civil
well,
service.
can, and this Clinton gets tripped up in this a lot. An applicant can send documentation to a fire department, but to say when you're not complete till you get a response back, it's a little onerous.
Mhm.
So maybe just filing with,
I think provide a review letter from them that
or
they can, their comments.
provide proof of filing with.
Yes.
But don't, I'm sorry, when we have an applicant that files an application, are they responsible for sending to, say, the fire marshal? Is that something that occurs as part of receiving?
That's
an
usually something that I would do, unless you would like to put that onto the applicant to do those things.
Like, how would we demonstrate if they? I'll defer to the board, but I
I don't
feel
think
like,
I don't think this makes sense for us.
yeah,
Like this one here, this I is not. We want, if our practice has been that we provide plans to all of the agencies, then it can't be a completeness item for them to have the review.
I think it should be our responsibility, because that's the best way to make sure that they respond.
Okay, well, then we'll just take I out altogether.
It's not something the applicant has to provide.
No, we're not, we're not
But
listing
it's
the
something that we are going.
I mean, I don't send it to the fire department rescue squad. I send it to the marshal, fire marshal, the police department, the missions, the HBC, the Shade Tree Commission, the environmental
That's
commission.
almost like our process,
to-
what you do with it.
Right,
That's
so
what
it's-
our
Well, that
process is
has
saying
been
that
the practice since I've been here. There's a staff letter that I complete, and now I just do it, and I send it to the water department and send it to the sewer department. So,
Maybe, so, I mean, I'm just thinking about like the different kinds of development. You know, like a large housing development. I think it's important that the rescue squad get notice and be allowed to opine, as well as the fire department, even though the fire marshal is part of the fire department technically, separately. But then if you have, you know, a place that's like Venus or a factory or light industrial, then maybe we do want that there as well. So, but not like, not tea berries,
Well,
not.
the binding is the one controlling where it goes. If there's a request that.
yeah, but I need some direction on, I mean, that's not my
Yeah.
call to say, like,
Right.
this one qualifies and this one does not qualify.
Right.
I mean, that's something that, I
It's
mean,
almost like I
maybe
have to tell you,
an applicant, as it comes to completeness, whether, or,
right, we have to say, I mean, this one gets these guys.
Right.
Right, but the other
but
piece,
but by the time that comes, you're coming to the board for completeness.
so because the issue ends up being that outside boards, Shade Tree, environmental, HPC, they get copies of it, but they have to submit their comments before the beginning of the public hearing.
That's one thing.
So-
So if they get that during the completeness period, then it's usually, at least 2 weeks, 3 weeks, until they're put on the agenda for completeness. And then completeness, generally, it's not the 2 weeks, because it's almost impossible to provide notice for a hearing. So it usually is 4 weeks by the time, so that does give the board, all of the commissions some time.
Like, we give them usually, the idea of them getting it when the application comes in, rather than waiting for it to be deemed complete, allows the
Right.
quirk of the calendar of like HPC, if you catch the HPC meeting or enough time. for
It
the fire
gives them a
department
heads
to
up.
review.
That is exactly what I want to try. We want to capture this in our procedures, that it's at the point when we've deemed it complete, then we're going to be sending it and asking for these, and these will need to be ready before the public hearing comes up.
So
How do we capture?
what I'm
what
saying
is
is,
gonna
what
happen?
I'm saying is it's not a checklist item. I'm saying that we need to come up. We can do this now, but my suggestion would be that we come up with a list of application types. Like, every application goes to HPC because that falls within the HPC district, because that's in our ordinance that they have to go in and review. Right.
Somewhere. in
Right,
here we'll get-
so that's already in our ordinance. Environmental commission gets everything, because that's how our ordinance is written.
Well, I say law.
And, right, that's it, right, so that's required, it's gotta be in there. If there's environmental commission, they get everything. Shade tree gets all of it, right? Right, like, so if the question is getting reviews from like rescue squad and police, if you want us to, there's not enough time for us to wait until like this. It needs to come in when it comes in the door, like when Eileen's sending it to the other agencies. And I think we need to give her guidance as to which,
Right.
the non-T-Berry, but yes, Liberty Village level of housing is gonna
Right.
need to know what's going
That,
on.
that's why I was wondering the time, like, it's almost like a checklist, but when we're going, when we do completeness and then we decide when are we gonna schedule it? It's almost like we go through with the applicant, then we need to get this to these people by this point. So it then informs what date we can schedule for, so they're aware, like, it's needed at that point, is it? But I get your point, you're saying, in some cases, we want it earlier.
We want it early then also because we have 45 days. We have a clock. And
Right.
so because of quirks of like this month where we have a meeting tonight, we don't have a meeting until for 4 weeks out. That's already 30, we're talking 30 days now. And so we've we can't, like if someone was in tonight deemed complete and then, or we couldn't wait till the second meeting in June because we have a timeliness issue. Right, we would have to hear them in 4 weeks and not in 6 weeks, because we could be running up against the 45-day clock, which would mean that we can't wait till completeness is done to send it out to these other folks for review, because we're not gonna have enough, and we can't make that call.
Send it until we've deemed it complete.
Sure we can. Do it all the time.
Okay. I'm just trying to see, isn't it, can we capture it here in where we said all applications must be submitted in 2 weeks? We're basically saying we also want them to submit them it's not just before the board meeting of the completeness meeting, when it's 3 weeks before the hearing.
Well,
We're
that's
giving
even
enough
the
time for 3
thing
weeks
up top
to
says at least 3 weeks. So,
Right, but I-
Jeff's point about the 45 days, if it
I'm
comes in,
trying to.
I know what you're trying to capture, and you're absolutely right. And what I'm suggesting is that what we need is, as a board, to determine which applications need to go beyond the ones that we're already sending to. I think this is what the mayor's.
Right.
And I think we can do that. That's internal process. Doesn't
Yeah.
require an ordinance change, really. It doesn't require us to do anything other than decide as a board to adopt policy.
We can put in our bylaws and. we can
Exactly.
change our
And we could do it, and
bylaws.
so that Eileen, so the board secretary knows
I think we
which ones have to go, but that's, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't have to go here.
Right, so we're gonna put a pin in it and we're gonna have that
So we're not
discussion.
gonna have that discussion.
I've got mark 2, that's the discussion about that timing of that. Thank you.
And pulling over the checklist also means that we're not requiring them to make a decision as to who it has to go to. We're deciding who else we want that way.
Right, I do wanna am I really wanting to capture somebody to tell them that we will be sending it to all these agencies?
no, you don't.
We don't have to do that? Okay.
You send it to whoever you want to send it to.
Okay,
There was a discussion before. We're allowed to talk to anybody that can get their opinion about product.
love it, love it. All right.
Okay,
Public utilities one, all the way to the bottom.
yeah, public utilities will serve, now again, I think you would want to have proof that they filed something to these agencies. And a lot of these are not going to get responses back. Until somebody actually comes in and signs a contract to, for service or whatever.
Didn't Cara have wording for this, or was it Beth, did I see? Instead of will serve, provide that you've submitted to apply for proof of submission, is that the way it's better?
Is that instead of provide will serve?
Yeah,
it's
provide
proof of
proof of
submission.
submission.
Proof of means this will come back, but these were asking that they should ask for it, they should start the process, right?
And who's that applicable to?
Yeah, who do we want them to say?
Well, you certainly want that for a major subdivision, and a minor subdivision. You would want that for your major preliminary site plan and for site plan.
Anything with the site plan.
Again, you can require it, if an applicant says that's really not necessarily ask for a waiver, they could ask for a waiver.
Like a T-Berry's may ask for a waiver
Right.
on that. Like, because it's an existing site already
And,
served by these
could be
areas.
granted, but a Liberty Village.
Clearly, we need none.
And do we want to restrict ourselves to these companies or just say public utilities is appropriate? Is this a suggestion? Because I don't know what companies, they might change their names and I don't want to change it every time. Elizabeth.
I just put electric and gas, the water and sewer we have covered in the other. So just electric.
Well, we took that other, oh no, we do it, sorry, we have it in H.
Yeah, well, that's-
Yeah. Yeah, I think we need to adjust that language a little bit, just treat it more general. Or even just.
You don't want to get rid of including JCP and all those.
No, like Bob already said, it's electric and gas.
Electric and battery.
Electric.
So you don't want to specify, those are your,
Yes, because
Now-
technically, it's, now they are, but First Energy bought JCP and L, whatever, at some point they're gonna change it
Yeah, yeah.
from it being JCP and L or First
I
Energy.
don't want to have to keep changing this checklist, so the company's changing that.
I don't know, I do electronic bills, I do like it.
and before we go too far, so just so the applicant is filling this out, the next columns after the criteria, the applicant fills it out. He says, yeah, I provided this, or no, it's not applicable, or you know, I'm asking for a waiver. So they're right there, they just, by symbol, they're indicating what they're asking for. The last column, again, this should simplify reports on this, where we just, if I'm reviewing this thing, I would go through and the applicant says they provided, I would just put a Y, yep, or
Right.
like, or if they ask for a waiver, yes, and then I would put a recommendation over here. The waiver should be granted or not granted, or maybe, try to come up with a code that, so that when I do a review letter, I'm basically telling you what the application is, what did you get? And then the recommendation based on the attached checklist that you should grant these waivers or whatever.
Would we need that middle one, but forgive me, if they're not requesting it already, and would we need you to write that? Is this use, when you, in your letter,
Well,
you
the first
said,
column- the
I
first-
suggest you,
The first column is them telling you what I'm submitting.
yeah,
Second column is me verifying that, yeah, they submitted it. Like, or no, a lot of times the applicant says they gave you something and they didn't.
well, what's the request waiver for in the, to be completed by the borough? Why would we request a waiver? Am I
No, we're not,
misunderstanding
that's,
that?
no, I'm just confirming that, yeah, waiver was requested.
They requested a waiver.
That's
But
just
didn't we already
confirming,
put that in the column to the left, complete by the applicant, waiver requested?
yeah,
Wouldn't
they're
that-
saying, I'm asking you for a waiver, and I would say, yep, waiver requested.
It's a
Or
check
if
that
they requested a waiver and you don't do the waiver granted, that means that they requested it, but you didn't get it.
This works, trust me.
Okay, sorry,
It works.
sorry. I
I'm
need
just
to
explaining
that.
what it, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
I
explaining what it
didn't
is.
want to have extra check for
No.
this and.
No, again, this is to be completed by the borough,
Right,
not the applicant.
choose,
Okay, moving on.
thank you. Okay,
Okay, again, 5 copies of existing title search, identifying, again, protective covenants, deed restrictions applying to the land being subdivided. There's a lot of wording in here. We can cut back on this, but basically it's a title search. I'm trying to explain what it is we're interested in.
And who has to do that?
Yeah.
But I mean, on the left side.
Okay, well, okay, here again, you wouldn't need it for a final major because you would have gotten it with the preliminary. You would need it for a minor. You should have it for any site plan application. And you should have it for any variance application.
But again, somebody who's doing an appeal of a zoning decision.
You probably
doesn't need
wouldn't.
a title search.
No, so
The concept plan doesn't need a title search.
so we'll take it out of those two.
Now, tell me, I know you said it's wordy, but I like that it's wordy because
That's fine.
this seems to be, am I right in thinking, this seems to be an issue that comes up a lot where they provide something, then you say, well, you provided this, and you didn't provide this one piece of information. So let's capture all the things you're expecting to find on them, right? Am I right in that? Right.
Yes, it's fine.
Things like green drawings often is one, you didn't put this on, so we have to ask them to resubmit that. I want to know what, all the things that, well, you would ask for. Is that right?
Yeah, but we actually have duplicate language. The blue came in from another section of your
Right.
checklist. You know, we have protective covenants and we have restrictions, so we clean up the language, so it's not,
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll cover all the things, like you said, the
Well,
right of
well-
way, is this where we would cover easements, current easements on here?
what?
Easements?
Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Done
say
that
that.
before, let's capture easements that we have.
That's what.
That would be a covenant or deed restriction.
Is it, that's assumed, okay, I just want to be really specific, because you've had to ask people several times to add those things on to plans, and I'd rather just issue them once.
Actually, this is twofold. It's asking for existing and the second part is proposed.
Proposed,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
so
when any existing or proposed.
proposed rights, of way, I like that.
we'll clean up this language so it's not, there's not duplicative stuff,
Okay,
but it'll cover.
Do we want to be explicit and say including easements grant? I mean, one of the ones that always pops up is easements for the borough for sewer
Yes.
and other utilities.
It's easements.
Is-
right, exactly, yeah, that's, we're always asking on, add that on the instruction list as well.
I have a question. Are they able to submit a document with proposed deed restrictions? I guess, and, or, well, I guess proposed deed restriction, but like, proposed rights of way, et cetera, would that be?
Sure.
Or is that just on their plan?
They can, yeah, really show where we're, you know, our ordinance requires it essentially. They're
Yeah,
showing it.
you know, final subdivision, that has to be approved, you know, we should have to have the necessary, rights of way and that.
We might also have utility easements that are necessary by the site plan.
I was just thinking about the distinction of a document versus something that's identified on the plan. And whether or not, whether
Well, it
there's,
says here delineation, again, this is a document, this is not on a plan, this is
Yeah.
a document they're handing you. So if they're proposing to dedicate an easement for completeness purposes, they should provide a copy of what it is they're proposing.
the draft, easement
Whatever,
language.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
It might get a little onerous, but again, you can always ask for waivers.
right,
Do we ever deal with conservation easements here? I've seen one, just,
I don't recall.
but it would be covered again under this, like if someone wanted to gift their, you know, if they wanted to do, grant a conservation easement to a land trust or something, for open space or blah, 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 like, as part of a subdivision or site plan, it would be covered under this.
So again, we'll condense this a little bit, so it's everything's in here, it's not repetitive. 5 copies of all deeds with meets and bounds description on key line, this is only applying to a minor subdivision. Meets and bounds,
Can I
why
ask?
is it separate L and M's then? Don't they say the same thing or not?
say it again.
Why do we have L and M? Are they completely separate? Am I missing?
Well, that's
something?
your, right, copies of all deeds with meets and bounds description showing dimensions, bearing curve, that's an actual deed.
Okay,
The delineation of right of way could just, well, that would be a deed too, actually.
okay.
This is deeds, not,
Yeah,
not
K
plan.
is more easements and restrictions, L is actual title documentation. As John said earlier, if you're doing a minor subdivision, you have to provide a deed that's gonna get recorded in order to protect the subdivision.
Is that why it's, that was only checked off there, but.
That's, yeah, because when you do major subdivisions, you do by the file.
All right, so this may sound really stupid, but you're using language of dimensions, bearings, curve, radii, arcs, chords, central angles, meets, bounds. That's like the archaic language. Are we stuck with that? Like, is that
No. Well, under certain circumstances, that's required for.
like under the MLU law, we have to,
This is a map filing. law.
like, it is the law, right, the map filing law use of the words meets and bounds, like that's still the standard phrases we're using.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to come up with a new term.
Propose a new one then.
They Pennsylvania changed the law, so I just.
Okay, there you go.
Oh, it's Harrisburg, so they're trying to. So, yeah, okay. Hold on.
So M is related to the deeds, answer the M by copies of deeds. Okay, that's needs to not show them. Okay, so that we should take that out of the minor subdivision category because we have it above. Like, it's the same wording except it's applying to different things.
Right.
So it shouldn't be applying in minor because the minor is above. Is it different?
Yeah.
The end is different easement dedications, including dedication of additional road right of way.
This one's for proposed.
Yeah. You know, the fact that we're accumulating this from different sources, there might be some repetition. There might be some more, we might be saying the same thing twice. And certification from owner that the property in question is not part of a prior land use application or providing a list of dates of prior applications. I don't know if you want that, or again, I can't.
Why do we care?
Why do you care? Why do you care?
Cross check what was.
Well, if there was a prior development, I mean, we should know if there was or not, but that's somebody
Yeah, I
telling us.
guess like with cut glass, if they show up in 10 years and nobody's up here left,
Yeah,
okay.
But
I
there
mean,
would be a
Consider what was in
condition,
the resolution.
there could be, a condition that was imposed as part of a prior application that we might want to know about. We might want to know that this board had issued a variance
Okay,
in 10 years later, 20 years later.
okay.
But let me play the other side of that though. How far back are we expecting to go?
I think they should file an Oprah request for all the resolutions and put that in the application.
if we don't really say.
I mean, certainly
just
for
saying
the
because-
appeal, we found that necessary to go back as far as possible, right, for the.
Right, but I'm saying if someone's coming in, if someone's coming in and the property was developed, my house was built in 1872.
Mhm.
And I am trying to document where, and somewhere in, I don't know, 1955, there was a variance granted for my garage. And I need to come in because I want to extend my garage 4 feet, right? Am I obligated to go do all that work for what is a
Well, you know what,
relatively
you have to
minor
wait,
thing?
say on the phone, yes, so I have to probably.
I don't want to make it too burdensome for a
On the other
simple
hand,
applicant.
on the other hand, we've got issues on Academy Street where a garage was built on top of an outflow pipe, a
Right.
water collection pipe
Right.
that is now creating major flooding on Academy.
Right.
So we would want to know, I guess. I don't,
And then,
I didn't ask for a waiver. I get what you're
I
saying.
mean, we're like one of the homeowners who's put on a shed. as an
Yes.
application.
And so they can just say, whoever can do that versus
Yeah.
cut glass.
Right, the cut
You know,
glass, I get the cut glass, I agree. I'm just worried about like, we've had causing too many, we have a lot of these little things that have happened without, I mean. Some of us have been around for a while, but none of us have been around that long, so like, there's been stuff that's happened.
right, so you're saying if you came with something and then somebody said, well, but that, wherever your garage has been put is now it's not in an approved place.
Right.
Do you have to prove that it was, then then we're getting into that. This is
Right, and again,
do we want
right.
to, you think, do we want to
I'm trying to
shine
make
the
it.
light that way? or
And
not?
we're trying to make a balance between what we need for completeness, right, to hear the application. Versus, and then for a big application, I think we want to be strict, because we get everything, put the burden on a large application to have everything there, but again, just making sure that the.
Is the burden on us
Individual.
to find it? And you're suggesting that the smaller one, the burden should be on us if we want to find something that.
No, I'm saying that like, we don't want to discourage somebody to come, we don't want someone putting up the shed without coming to us at all. What I'm worried about is we make it too burdensome for an individual property owner. They look at the checklist, they're gonna be like, screw this, I'm putting up the shed without a permit, and then we have it built on top of the sewer outflow.
But I would say it's a number of waivers, I mean, like, both parents, if you want to put up a shed, you just show us the plot plan.
Yeah,
Well, if it's a residential house and they're putting up a shed, there's nothing that they're gonna come before this board anyway. Unless they're not meeting a setback, unless the
I'm
zone.
talking setback, I'm talking like a setback situation. I mean, that's the one that I could imagine most commonly happen. Setback to rear yard or side yard or something, like my garage, I can tell you right now, this is no secret, my garage is sitting on the property. Like within 6 inches of the property line, and it just is. And if I did anything on my property that would trigger site plan, I'm gonna have to come in for a variance. Right, so, and but I know what I'm doing here. I don't want to discourage other folks from not following the process, that's all.
So if we're gonna ask for historic information about the property and not permits, but resolutions, why don't we just target that to larger applications?
Well, that's kind of where I was going, but I don't know how to write that.
But maybe it's just final site plan. or
If
major
you
site
take,
plan.
you take it out of minor, you
Put it
take-
in major,
Yeah.
major.
So not for the variance, and so if you're just coming in for a C variance, you don't need to pull that information.
All those out, all the variance ones.
Well, I mean,
Put it in majors.
definitely, like, maybe it's, maybe D variance still needs it. Maybe it doesn't.
Variance might need it.
What,
Yeah, I
like,
agree.
to your point, what are we asking for it for? What are we looking to find that should we find it?
Well, I think that's making a really good point, though, that like, we want to make sure that there's not prior approvals and other resolution and
Yeah.
compliance issue,
We can cross-check
conditions.
their testimony about what previously occurred. It may not even cross-check, but it might also inform them as to what previously occurred.
We had somebody coming in, I don't know, within the last year, who it was a house, and they wanted to like expand the house, and it was like a father was a contractor, I don't remember where it was, right? And I felt, no, it doesn't matter what, but like there was, but it was a whole to do because of, they needed to come in and end up doing site plan, essentially. And it was,
They'd taken something down and then they were adding.
Well, it was the house on Dewey. It was their, right by me, and there was a house fire when they were doing, a remodel. And then from the house fire, they were looking to then do an extension, but then they found out all this stuff that they were grandfathered in, but they weren't zoned for.
right, so I want to make sure that we're not putting too much of a burden on an applicant.
Right,
No.
but then. Oh gosh. it's
Well,
so
keep in mind, this is
complicated.
something you don't have in your current checklist.
And that's why
it's
it's- That's why I'm raising the issue, it's in red, that's why it's like. It could
I
just
think
be,
the word certification makes it very. Awful.
Yeah.
I don't, we don't want them to certify it and get it like, you know, signed off, but just a statement that they, and to your point, do we want to say within 20 years or 25 years or something? Limit their requirement to provide it, but without restricting ourselves that if we want to go further back on our
And we can always ask for more information
Right.
regardless of whether it's on the checklist.
Right.
right, like, the Cock example is really a good one, though, like, I would not want to hear anybody coming in without having all of the history.
Well, no. I tell you what. is a
Including
good
where
example
is
too.
the cupola for the beach?
Right,
I'll tell you what, another good example is the Spice Factory that came back,
yeah.
and they weren't aware of the previous, what we'd agreed with them, and that.
Yeah, that one was
remember
20
that
minutes,
bothered us.
that was 20 minutes ago, like, they should have known that.
I know exactly, and that, we were frustrated, I remember
Yeah.
that, so that we were frustrated, they hadn't even bothered to find out what the previous approval was.
I think if we restrict it to the major applications,
I think we should ask for resolution specifically rather than a certification.
yeah,
And then even if there are no resolutions, they'll be able to indicate that it's been provided, but that honestly, the applicant should provide a note that they make a request with no resolutions. And so,
So we're asking for proof of resolutions rather than, a whole application, we're asking for.
submission of resolutions applicable to the property. Yeah, I'm sorry, Ellen. I feel like you're the one that's gonna have to.
she's not the
process.
overall.
Oh, you don't pull resolutions?
Yes, I do.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Resolutions is easier than saying all applications, because there might be applications that never went.
No, just the resolutions. I don't think we need construction permits. I don't necessarily want the documentation for those. We can get that if necessary during the hearing.
It's
Well, that's
resolutions and the
Yeah.
specifics on those resolutions, but,
So do you want to change the word certification to something else?
Yeah,
yeah, it's almost like we said, like, proof of request or something. Proof that you've requested it. Proof
No,
of
we want the
submission.
actual
We
resolution.
want the actual, so we
Yeah.
don't, we want,
Yeah, it should be resolutions applicable to the property. Or similar language.
yeah, I think we need to ask,
So
I think that's some language.
by, first, number one is, it has not been part of that prior application, or number two, provide a list of dates with all prior applications. You want to add to that resolutions.
We just want the resolutions, we want to provide a list of
Going back.
applicable, would it be applicable?
And don't follow the
Resolution.
request, they'll say what, yeah,
Applicable resolutions.
Yeah.
or
Or certification.
certification that a number of requests yielded no results. or
Yeah.
something
Oh,
like
yeah,
that.
that's good, yeah.
Well, they could actually, like, the clerk would send them, the record manager, the clerk would
Right.
send them something saying.
There are
There was
results.
nothing, so we went back.
That's the thing.
And for what columns,
Well, I think it's the major stuff.
things.
right?
Yeah.
So,
It says major,
And a date, I think.
so
well, you know, you're doing, again, we hardly ever see a minor subdivision. If you would want to see that for a minor subdivision as well.
So all subdivisions.
All the subdivisions,
Yeah.
major,
Well, you wouldn't need it for major final, because you would have gotten it for the major.
And a D variance.
D variance, and I don't think we need it for C variances, but,
Okay.
although I don't know, okay, what else is under a C variance? Setbacks, FARs, not FARs, with you. Was it impervious,
Yeah, but think about it, you're never gonna see an impervious coverage variance unless it was a part of the
from the
site plan.
site plan?
Yeah.
So you're gonna get it there.
But what other standalone Cs are there?
You're just general bulk.
It's bulk stuff, right?
Well, a residential house with setback variance would just, there'd be no site plan.
Right. So do we need it for the Cs?
I don't think
The
so.
standalone C?
I don't think, to the point of trying not to be a burden to homeowners that are looking to improve their
Yeah.
properties. I'm really not worried about a resolution from 15 years ago for a single family home that's now expanding their garage, maybe again, compared to, a final site plan for commercial use.
Yeah, I think that will cover it.
Okay, so, always outside agency. That they filed with, they provided application with appropriate fees are required for information submitted directly to. We don't submit to the, they submit to the agency, right? Like
Yeah.
county.
No, I don't submit any applications to the, soil conservation district. That
Right.
would be above and, that's not
So
my,
we're saying,
I feel even comfortable, doing something like that because it has fees involved and I'm not submitting their documentation
so
to an outside agency.
always
I don't, I'm
saying-
not qualified to do that.
provide us with copies of what you filed with these agencies. County planning board, and some of these might be not, again, they might check not applicable, be not disturbing more than 2,000
You're
square
talking
feet.
also DEP and DOT too, right?
Well, no,
I certainly wouldn't be qualified to
No.
do that.
no, because those would always be, your action would be subject to their ability, to obtain outside for a state agency.
They might do it concurrent.
Well, they could, but we don't normally put, I've never put that on.
DEP is really backed up.
This is the county planning board, which has to act, again, to the extent that they have jurisdiction, but.
And you're just talking about the three that are below.
The three local, and the health department is probably most likely not gonna be applicable to any of these, because you're on sewer, so.
Did we say we wanted to know that they'd done this DEP and DOT applications, that would some that current aren't, because we.
I thought Kara
what's
said
the
that
point of
that
us
was
going through our
a
process if
higher
they don't
jurisdiction
apply?
than,
Yeah, that was the issue.
Hmm?
They're higher jurisdiction.
No, we just wanted to know that they had started the application process.
you can.
But I thought I thought that was a character that we couldn't require that as a checklist.
So why,
To just even know.
Oh,
that
We
they
can,
started.
we have jurisdiction to do it as a condition of approval.
What's the purpose of making sure that they've submitted it?
before, because then we go.
Well, they have
through the
another
process.
county agency has. Okay, soil conservation, if it's subject to soil conservation, and let's take, well, I don't want to talk about specific applications, but, if it's subject to soil conservation, they come to us with a plan, we review the whole plan. And then we approve it, and then the soil conservation district comes back and says, well, wait a minute, you need this, this, and this, you got. It's more for, having a coherent review of the application. You can't do that with DEP or DOT because, I mean, in some cases, it makes sense for the applicant to go to DOT up front, but you can't require them to. But on the county level, the county agencies are really acting in conjunction. I mean, that's how I would view it. And a lot, we've had numerous applications where the county planning board had a concurrent jurisdiction with local planning. So, they'll do a review and we'll do a review and they'll come up with recommendations and we have to, the applicants, subject to those conditions as well. It's kind of rare that there's conflicting stuff, but you want to flush that out up front.
And that's a completeness. I'm just trying to think. I do not remember. I can't tell you the last
Now,
time.
you don't have, this is in red, this is coming.
Right.
quick.
I know, but the thing is, I mean,
If you don't want it, you don't need
We
it.
haven't done it.
but again, I'm expanding my garage. Really? The Hunterdon County Department of Health?
Well, it's not, you would put,
Well, then,
Yeah, but-
it's not applicable.
yeah, but go to that, but no
But
policy.
so you really are though, for this, you're requiring somebody to have an attorney. Because a delayed person expanding the garage saying, I'm sorry, Eileen, I have to, where do I get an application to the Hunterdon County Soil Conservation District? And you know what I mean? It just seems excessive
So
for
then let's talk about it like we have.
the
we just did for
major,
The other one, so what,
right?
which kinds of applications are there jurisdiction for? Look, the thing is, if a single residential property happens to be on a county road, Hunterdon County Planning Board has jurisdiction.
Right.
Like, they're gonna have to do it.
Yeah, and this is just making them be aware of what they need to do. They can always say, I don't think it's
Like-
applicable.
Like any house, like a house on Route 12 is gonna have to go to the county.
Right.
It's ridiculous, but that's what you're saying.
With that in mind, can we add on D and D and DOT and like say it's not applicable all these stuff? Can we're not.
The other thing that can happen,
Yeah,
and just
fine.
as we're talking this through, is that they're gonna submit it, they're gonna like, no, they'll say, no, I don't need it, no, I don't need it. Bob's gonna go through it, and he's gonna come back and say, actually, yeah, you do.
Well, that's why I want a space instead of leaving, you know what I mean? I want a space, even if we say it's not. I want
Well,
a-
that's what his column is on the right side.
No, I'm saying I want a space for DEP and DOT.
No, we can't require that. There's supremacy on.
Again, I don't care about the, I just want to know if they started filing.
I'll start it finally.
Yeah. And what?
We're not asking for it to be completed, we're asking for the application to be completed. We're not saying that they've got permission. I just, if this is a checklist, it's like identifying what we want them to.
I'm gonna give a perfect example of this. You know, I started talking to Cardinal when I became mayor a year and a half ago about their subdivision, and I said to them a year and a half ago, have you gone to the DEP yet? And they said, oh, we're not sure we really have to. And 5 months ago, DEP basically has now shut down their project because they're demanding all kinds of stormwater stuff. That's like, so I waste, you know,
The town
The
was-
borough wastes some resources on something.
Yeah.
That needs to be.
well, I certainly wasted my time with them, and, you know, and it's been very frustrating, that's like the perfect example, just to know that they even went.
Yeah.
Just, did you go, did you start talking to them, and that way, here we can go, oh, yeah, you do, here's the stormwater law, the ordinance we have, with the state's ordinance, or whatever.
Well, let me offer a suggestion here. Let's scratch Hunterdon County Health Department because there's almost virtually no application that's gonna.
Well, somebody said down here, I think it was Jeff.
I thought it was gonna be a restaurant. like-
Restaurant.
Well, again, that'd be part of the, it does have to be complete. We would pick that up.
We would pick that up as part of the
We
application.
don't need to have, and everybody and their brother go to the health department and or say, again, like I said, a small applicant get confused, why do I have to go to the health department?
Right.
This came out of it, probably an earlier checklist where you have a lot of, if you're on septic or something, yeah, you certainly would.
Yeah.
So let's just scratch that.
Which would you have?
Well, yes, well, and we can put Hunterdon County Soil Cut District, we can put as a.
Yeah.
Sure, and same with DEP and DOT then, can we have them in on that basis?
Well, they're actually a little late, they're actually they're on your current checklist, so you're gonna get to that in a minute.
Oh, okay, sorry.
All right.
All right, I just wanted to do, that was, I like that. And then choose which we then need to go to.
You could put it
Maybe we
in.
can move it up.
And
All right.
And if it says, again, I'm trying to think of a layperson, if it says if applicable, there's somebody in this office that can help an applicant. I want to put a glass enclosure on my restaurant. Do I need Hunterdon County Soil Conservation? Honestly, is there some,
I have no idea.
in other words,
Not being
That's
used.
but what that?
they would say, all the soil conservation.
Yeah.
I know, but-
wanna-
Oh, okay, I'm just trying to think of,
I mean, look, you could start specifying.
If I say yes or
basic
no
trigger.
and I'm wrong, then,
Basic trigger
you
is
know,
disturbance of
boroughs
2,000 square feet. So you can have your checklist go into further detail if you're disturbing more than 2,000 square feet.
Look, if we wanted to think of this as a workflow rather than a spreadsheet, we would have like a computer program that would ask a series of questions in turbo.
Drop down
Right,
menus.
and say, does this require more than 2,000? You need to go to soil conservation,
Yeah.
but we're not, but that's not how we're building.
No,
Right.
yeah.
Also,
Do you think there's a different way to get this information across, or do we leave it for major things?
I think we can put certain information on the website and with the application that talks about when you need to talk.
We can take it out of the variance ones, because it's just soil conservation, that's a land development, variance is a use issue. So we can take it out of
Leave it
those
for the
three,
major things,
but,
and then it's still sitting there for people to see, go, "Oh,
right. And how do we define minor site?
I always forget. Now we're getting into definitions.
All right, so, P is just certification from the tax assessor, the taxes are paid, you want that for pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Um,
Everything is still.
so Q is a combination of stuff that's coming from your current thing with percolation tests.
Well, that wouldn't come from the tax assessor. That would be the tax collector. The tax assessment is obviously assessment. And would you add the utilities at that time as well?
That's in another location.
Because they always look at
The MLU over a minor sentence.
Right, yeah.
Thank you.
Why we carry the book.
So Q, we kind of modified a little bit. So percolation test soil logs conducted in the property in question, if applicable, for stormwater management facilities in accordance with DEP BMP manual chapter 4. So basically saying if you do, and again, that would only be applicable to a major or minor site plan, or a major site, I'm sorry.
Major site, minor, major.
Yeah.
So,
And again, it might be not, somebody might just say, well, not applicable. So under those standards, I'm not under that category. Next one really applies to subdivisions. If they're assigning block and lot numbers, you would want, the assessor to be assigned, verified that what they're assigning numbers are in fact correct. And again, you could scratch the major subdivision because you would have gotten that with, or you should have gotten that. 5 copies of the drainage calculation, drainage area maps, analyzed existing post conditions required to comply with the borough stormwater ordinance.
Just in some other towns that, thinking of the tax assessors, block and lots. We also have a 911 coordinator for 911 for addresses. Could that be, assignment of those addresses as well?
Is that, do they do that as a checklist reform or do they do it as a?
Yeah, they do as a checklist. And actually even on signage, they have 911 addresses that are required on all signage. For any kind of emergency services that are
Address
required.
911 service recognizes a true official address of collection.
Right, get the official addresses before they start,
but what happens if they don't get approved?
Well, it's similar to the tax assessor assigning. It could be done later on
It's
and
preliminary. Like,
it may
if you're
not
doing
be something for completeness.
Yeah, if you're doing a subdivision of, block 46, lot 13, and it's gonna be 1301 and 1302, that's generally how you do it. That's different than what's the new address on. I know Liberty Village is its own animal, but like same idea that we're building new roads, right?
We'll have new
Addresses.
addresses.
But it did come up on one plan that they listed the address wrong because we changed the name of the road and they didn't reflect that.
Well, because we changed Central to Central Station.
Right.
The map was wrong. I think that was.
Would that have been captured by what Ellen's saying, and then, can we have that list of, we don't have a list, we need context, we would have to ask them.
Yeah,
I
and it's
guess
usually set by the
we can
county.
actual addresses, officially.
Yeah.
Is that what we're saying?
And I think
Well,
it's
yeah,
approved by the county, 911 coordinator.
It's probably worth putting it here for address.
I like that, because then it's clear then, everyone.
It's really only a
knows what their address
Yeah,
is.
it's only major subdivision.
Yeah,
So it'd be, and street addresses.
Yeah.
Under R, right?
This is all.
Under R.
so you're saying street address, would that be as provided on matching the 911?
How is the language of the other?
Language, do you know?
I'd have to.
Yeah, there's a reference to that, yeah.
Yeah, it's
Right.
Certified by the 911 coordinator,
Right,
Yeah, well,
approved by,
yeah, I like that.
S is
Wait,
the,
do we have an OEM coordinator, is that the same thing?
no.
911 is the guy from Hunterdon County?
The Hunter County, yeah, that runs the.
yeah, they're in the
Okay.
communications.
Okay.
So if you call them, they know what your address is.
Yep.
Exactly.
That we don't duplicate, and the post office used to get involved in that, whether they,
Right.
that they still do it.
Well, the 911 coordinator would kind of look at all of the different street names within Flemington address area, not just Flemington Borough, maybe Marion, anything that has Flemington address, that you wouldn't have a duplicate name of Maple Avenue.
Oh, so they're doing like, maybe you can't have Maple Avenue just if there's Maple Road. or
Yeah, if there's
you can-
confusion with the rescue squads
That's
and
great.
emergency services responding to.
Good idea.
Right.
Okay, so the drainage calculations, again, they're applicable to the major preliminary and to the I'm sorry, major preliminary subdivisions and the two different, not necessarily major site, but major preliminary. Now, this is, a lot of this language is coming out of your current, not in this particular section, so 5 copies, this is from your current ordinance, stream encroachment permit with Bureau of Floodplain Management, DEP have issued showing stream encroachment area and scale being used by the applicant. That language is coming out of your current, we added in your flood hazard calculations for cross sections. A stream if applicant is not relying upon a published survey of flood hazard delineations. You're not asking them to file with the agency, but you're asking them to document what they believe those encroachments and those permits, the state ordinances would require. This is not worded very well because that's a combination of stuff that came from several different sources, right?
So that just needs tidying up, editing on the wording. So just-
Yeah, I don't know that we say stream encroachment permit, but we really can't require that as a provision. We probably should reword that.
So we don't need a permit, but we definitely want
Want the
to
document.
give them a map, give us a map that shows that they're aware of where they lie within that map.
Right. Being used by the applicant for submission and him to provide flood hazard calculations stream if they're not relying upon a published survey of flood data.
Right.
So we really need to clean that language up, but we're not saying you have to go to an agency to get a permit. We're just saying if we're gonna review something on Liberty Village, or we've had this in a couple of situations along Ryan Brook and some other situations where you kind of want to know where they think the floodplain is before you come into proposing parking lots and all kinds of other stuff. 5 copies and digital copy of environmental impact statement. Did Dennis have a copy? Dennis, did you have a comment on that?
No, this is on,
It's on HPC.
Okay, sorry.
I'd like the environmental commission's view on this, because on where, on which one we would ask for that for, because I think we need that in situations where it's not just a derailing, am I right in thinking that?
But in EIS,
I wanted to, it might not even be a full environmental impact statement, but we definitely want like environment, do you know what I'm saying? That we might need-
Well, we're asking for it on major site plans, and major subdivisions.
Yeah. But we've definitely, I know I definitely felt like we should have had more of an environmental statement from applicants on smaller applications, but I don't always remember which ones and whether they were major ones or not.
problems with EIS, EIS, is a huge thing. And it's a
Yes.
big, it's appropriate on major sites, for sure.
Oh, absolutely, and that's a given.
Well, and
But-
unless you have a checklist for what you want in EIS, EIS could be somebody, 1-page document.
It can be a simple, but it's a simple, it's an identification of the environment.
Oh, I thought that's defined somewhere in EIS, actually.
Nothing else. But a lot of towns have separate checklists for you.
That's something I'd like the environmental commission to think about and report back to us. Like what would we like to see from, this is a chance to say, what would we like to see? We can submit to them. As opposed to just you looking at the site plans. For them to pull out what the environmental issues are. Are we allowed to do that? Is that appropriate? Oh, yeah, we can ask for whatever we want.
So I'm looking at, this may be just part of our ordinance edits that we have to do once
Yeah.
we get through this. But in section 1514 of the Borough Code, it states, variance application not involving a site plan or subdivision application shall not require an EIS unless specifically requested by the approving authority. So I think that would be as part of the application. Any major subdivision and or minor site plan to the approving authority shall not require an EIS unless specifically
So which one-
requested by the approving authority. That language probably needs to get cleaned
I
up.
was gonna say, I lost the language, that tell me
Yeah.
which one does and which one doesn't then, so currently our ordinance says which ones need it? Mine, you said minor site plan, yes.
Minor doesn't.
And I will say that our ordinance, I'm sorry, just so everybody knows, it has, I'm not sure whether it's good enough, but it has extensive requirements of what needs to be included.
But also.
Yeah.
But it also says that, did I hear you correctly, it's saying, or at our discretion, we can ask for one, outside of those where it says we definitely need one, is that correct?
Yeah, it does. And so I think that would, yeah, so that, I guess that seems to be a nod to either the checklist or just part of ongoing application hearings, if the board feels it needs more information.
So how do we capture that on here, that we have the, I don't want this checklist to go forward with just those 3 items which are there in the ordinance, if we have the option to ask for it. How do we capture that?
Well, you always have the option.
Well, what I mean is, when they look at this checklist, I want them to be aware that we can ask, it's almost like a dotted check mark on some of these others, depending on what it is. How do we capture that?
Section of the work.
15, it's section 1514.
So we
Because
include
the
it.
ordinance is open to, at our discretion, we can ask for an EIS for any variance, for any
Right, so
plan.
but the difference is between making it a checklist requirement to
Yeah.
complete versus as part of the hearing,
We
we
make
say, you need, as part of this application, we're gonna need an EIS. Which the ordinance seems to allow us to do, right, as opposed to it being a checklist requirement. So the question, I guess, would be, under what conditions do we absolutely need to always have it? That would be your checklist requirement. And I think that's what, and then we, as opposed to us having some sort of internal guidance again as to when we would ask for it.
It's a procedural item again, it goes in that procedural list of,
Yeah.
when we get to it, we're gonna also ask, for you, in this case,
Right.
to provide us with one, even though I checked, they said you don't have to have one.
Right, like when someone's here for completeness, and when we're hearing the application, if Bob reviews it or whatever, we have a conversation and we're like, look, you're gonna have to do an EIS, just be aware that we're gonna require, that's, you need to be ready for that.
Right, and that's, yeah, so then it comes down to our procedure, and
Yeah.
that's on that procedure list. Because not every application is the same, and there might be one that really.
I'm sorry, but it's not, and maybe this is, I'm not sure if this is a distinction you're making, but if they're not required to do an EIS pursuant to the checklist, but as we're doing completeness, we realize we're gonna have environmental concerns. We're gonna
Yes.
want that information.
Yeah.
I think that the board, we have the ability to say, we want that information as part of our hearing, but I don't think we can hold their hearing until we get that information. Because it's not a completeness item, it's like the hearing should be able to start. We may
Right.
not be able to finish until we have enough information,
Right.
until you guys have enough.
So
until you
again,
can
that's
make
a
a
warning
decision.
to the applicant on that.
Yeah, so it's not really a
That might happen in
procedure,
agreement.
it's like, you know, the same way we might tell an applicant,
Be ready the testimony
Yeah,
about
exactly.
parking because
Yeah.
we're gonna have a lot of questions.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and, Melissa, can I ask you to bring that back to the Environmental Commission to look at that ordinance, think about when we might add that in, whether there's, yeah, and then we can get your viewpoint on that. How we do that.
So do you think you want it listed as on a checklist as what the ordinance talks about?
I think it should be on
The
the
ordinance,
checklist. for sure.
does this match the ordinance, Beth, these 3 checks right now that Bob's put on? Is that the word?
No, because
No.
it says, it says in here, a variance application not involving site plan or well, the ordinance is not well written.
No.
So let me say that, but it says it shall not be required for a variance application that does not involve site plan or subdivision unless requested by the approving authority. So as I look at this,
Required for one,
yeah, we have this listed as a D.
right.
Honestly, I guess this ordinance could be interpreted in a number of ways, but
So if the variance needs a site plan, they have to provide one, is that the wording? If the variance doesn't need a site plan, they don't have to provide one, that's the wording.
So we've got a check here under, D variance, and the way you're reading that, Beth, suggests that standalone D variance, it's not part of the site plan. Should not, is according to what you just read, should not require an EIS.
So if I want to build,
Yeah.
if I want to build a house in an industrial or commercial zone.
Yeah.
And I'm coming in, not a site plan, I'm coming in for a
Use
variance,
variance.
You don't need to do.
I don't need to do it.
According to that ordinance, we shouldn't do an EIS, so we have to take that check.
So we can still leave it here and just say, and per recite section of the ordinance.
Yeah, but
just
it's,
like the ordinance.
but I think you've got to check here for a standalone D.
You
Yeah.
have to
And
take
there's
that
no,
out,
that, I think it has to come away because.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
because it's not always required that in that.
If someone did a use only variance like you're describing, Bob, the ordinance says they don't need to come do it.
And use only is just occupancy of an existing building, essentially.
Correct.
So there's not a lot of, they're not disturbing wetlands and things like that, or flood hazard area necessarily. We might want to know where the flood hazard is as part of the application, but that's so much less than an EIS.
But is the implication of the wording also that anyone that does require a site plan requires one?
Yes.
Because it says,
Yeah.
so all the site plans need to be checked. All these boxes on the site plan and subdivision need to be
It's
checked.
not minors.
Not the
But
minors.
not the minors.
So let's say, the section 1 of this particular part of the code addresses agricultural operations. I'm gonna skip that. That's probably been pulled from another town. Section 2 is a variance application not involving site plan or subdivision. We talked about that. In that case, it shall not be required unless specifically requested.
Mm.
Section 3, any major subdivision or minor site plan shall not require an EIS unless specifically requested. So same language as the variance. And then section 4, last, states all preliminary major subdivision and preliminary major site plan applications shall be accompanied by an EIS.
So those are the only two that we should have
Right.
checks.
And then to Bob's point, if we reference that ordinance,
Preliminary.
Subdivision. and site
Okay.
plan.
they will have seen the wording that says at our discretion, and therefore the one that we made.
Okay, so we'll leave it checked on those two classifications, so take it out of the variance.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, now the next one, again, this is a combination of coming from different sources about wetland reports.
Mhm.
And maps showing wetland delineation prepared by a professional. Now, 90% of what you're gonna see in the borough, it's not gonna be anywhere near wetland. Do you want that, you wanna say as applicable, do you wanna say, you want to, now go actually hire a professional to go look at the property and say, yeah, there's no wetlands in the middle of town?
Is there a map of wetlands locations?
FEMA.
Yeah.
Provide smooth firm showing that you're not.
Right, just like
So maybe we change it to that.
you just provide them to show that you're,
Either proof that you are not
yeah,
in a published wetlands according to DEP, which is.
yeah,
Or-
whatever is written in.
And
Yeah,
that would be the same for a D though, Beth, but wouldn't that follow suit that you would not need that for a D?
I
That
think
didn't,
so. Yeah,
right?
for wetlands specifically. I don't think we need that for the grounds.
So we should follow what we, but we might want that for minor subdivision
Yeah.
and
Right.
minor site plan.
Right, you
Anything
would,
that's gonna put a new structure on the ground. Yeah, I agree.
So those 6 should have it.
Right.
Four, major, minor, yeah. those-
right.
So you want some reference in here to the published, the DEP published,
Yeah, the person is proof of whether you're in it or not, and if you are in it, then the wording that you've got. Is that right, Greg? Is that what
That's
you're
what I think that's what we
saying? I think it does.
I think B and W are
yeah, or B,
really similar.
yeah, B,
Yeah.
I mean, they might be one thing.
well, yeah, W goes actually, you're filing an application with the DEP. Now, again, this is from there's a lot of duplicate because we pulled this from different sources. This one here in blue actually comes, that's your current ordinance. That's your current checklist.
Oh, how does this tie in with the last one? And what did we double up? What runs before?
that's what we're just looking at.
So W is saying if there is something issued from NJDEP, include it. I know it doesn't feel like that's what it's saying, but that's actually what it's saying.
But do we need both V and W on it?
We do.
We do, okay.
Yeah,
Because V is like, there's, is there wetlands or not wetlands, and W is, we gave you a letter, give us the letter.
Yeah, V is just saying we want a report from a wetland consultant. W is saying you actually want the conference, you want that filed with the DEP for issuance of a letter of interpretation.
If, but the if needed, or, no, it doesn't say that. It says if issued.
Well, again, that's your current language. That's what your current checklist it says.
I think it would be clearer if we change the order of the words in W. And put the if issued at the top. If issued, copies of any letters of interpretation for wetlands from the land use regulations, DEP, or letter of exception from the and documents sent with the application for DEP. Like that way, everybody knows that if there is no letter, that it's not applicable to them.
And then this the red word in the, we'll consider a request for a waiver. Did we already cover that in V where we said you can provide proof in V that you're not in a wetland? Did we already kind of cover that?
I think we do.
Yeah.
So that would be covered there, and then this
take it
one,
out.
just,
So
yeah,
take it out of that.
yeah.
Yep.
Almost transfer it over.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, should we call it V1 and V2 because they're related, or do we need separate letters? Anybody feel strongly about that?
They're separate because W ends up being if there's a letter.
Right.
And V is, we want everyone to respond to that. Either show us that you're not in the wetlands or show us that there is.
Sure, you hired somebody.
Do they need, if they're in a wetland, do they need a letter from those people in W and a professional wetlands consultant report as well?
Well,
Would they need both?
if they file an application that they have if there's a map of map of a possible wetland area, they have a report that says, yeah, there's a wetland area here.
Right.
There's no wetland area here. What we would require, maybe not as necessarily a completeness checklist item, but we would require as a condition that they actually get that confirmed by the state, which is what the letter of interpretation process is. It's a confirmation process.
The letter process in W, Karen, also allows somebody who had this done previously
To do something.
just to submit it, not make us have to do it.
I get that. What I'm wondering about is are we because we already asked for W, which is DEP, but then in V we would also be asking them to prepare a report. Is that appropriate if they already have a letter? Do they need to do another report?
No, well, if they have a letter, they already have a report. To get a letter, you need to submit a report.
Right.
And Bob, a W also goes into C.
Oh, like that.
What do you mean, say?
It was on that, it has an hour.
No, W
Corporation.
goes into C.
Oh, C variance.
Oh, C variance.
No.
It's too late to go speak like that.
Now, take it out of the major final because you would have gotten with the preliminary relief or the minor subdivision.
But it also would come out of C and D.
Yeah, it should come in.
And D.
It was a standalone.
Again, you're not gonna get a,
We took it out.
Right.
yeah. Actually, it's procedural. They're asking for a waiver. They need to have a narrative indicating what they're asking for and why they're asking for it.
Is that right? Because I thought this checklist was to make it simple and then just put here, maybe request it. Are we saying if they check this box, maybe request it, we're asking for supplemental detail,
I
right?
think we need to get some
Okay.
justifications.
Written statements of the applicant identifying the request for a waiver. Yeah, again, you're right. I mean, the checklist is already doing that.
Why don't we edit that to be the justification? for the waiver,
Justification, there you go.
Or explanation as to why it's not applicable.
Yeah.
That we may ask for that, yeah. They need to be ready with that.
You know, we want to know why something might not be applicable. It may be quite obvious to them, but not.
Right.
Or
Yes,
their
I-
rationale might be wrong and we can patch it.
Exactly.
Yes, yes, exactly. I like that.
Site photographs for major preliminary for major site plan, all site plans.
We have the rest ask for these for variances as well, then, don't we?
Say it again?
We often ask for photographs of the site for variances.
I think Cs and Ds probably are worth asking
Yeah.
for photographs.
Because usually, yeah, if it's a D, like a height thing, we want to see, we also usually ask for a rendering.
I think C, if we're talking about a bulk variance, we're gonna want to see some images.
Yeah.
Do you want mounted renderings? I'm not sure.
I don't want them.
No.
Okay. So get rid of Z.
Like, it's such an expense for applicants.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially
I'm
as
thinking
technology's moved on,
Yeah,
it
it's-
can provide, it doesn't, well, why don't we say renderings, but it doesn't have to be a physical rendering, it can be provided electronically, can't it? No, renderings?
But the site plan itself is an elevations.
Oh, this was something separate from the site plan, but we often ask for, give us how this looks from the street, would this be captured here? You know what I'm saying? We say, oh, compare this with this, and we want to see. it.
Okay, so maybe it's not mounted renderings of site plan / subdivision layout, it's
Rendering.
just renderings, and it doesn't have to be mounted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But shouldn't that be included in the latter part of the document? Because we're asking for architectural plans later on page 7. It seems like rendering should go with.
Page
Right.
7 is a different.
Yeah, but if we only make it required for subdivision and site plan,
Yeah.
we're not asking for architectural renderings here, we're asking for that later. For completeness, I want us to be able to see what the site, otherwise, we're not gonna get an actual copy of the site,
Mm.
of the subdivision plan. Where else in the checklist have we actually said, give us the map?
Give us a site plan.
Well,
It's
that's the
all-
whole,
it's
that's the
all-
whole next section.
Yeah, it's all in the next section. It's all-
Okay,
Which we're gonna do.
but that's,
This is rendering.
oh, yeah, okay, yeah, you're right, we get
This
it.
is documentation that's not on.
That's not on the map. Yeah,
We
yeah,
ask
yeah.
for 3D visual, and often they give them anyway, they want to give them as part
Yeah,
of
you're right.
the
We don't-
documentation, but
We don't need mounted.
Yeah, I'm fine. I don't object to requiring renderings. I actually just think it should be later in the document. That's
Okay.
my
So
only
move
point.
C to the section,
Yeah.
second section.
Yeah, like next to the item 37, where architectural plans, maybe new 38 should be renderings. of the
rendering,
building.
3D
Hold
rendering.
that thought.
I will.
That's all we get to that.
Model.
Well, then we've got, again, so does that apply to the rest of the things, the staging or the building?
Well, no, it's stages or staging plans. I guess I could go with the plans. We can move that over to plans.
Yeah, I think.
Same with
Building isometrics can move over
Yeah.
to plans. Traffic impact statement would stay here.
Would stay here for sure, yeah, and then the electronic submission, I was
It should
gonna
be on
mention that earlier, that
That should be everybody.
electronics, it has to be,
Everybody's
it
got.
has to be able to be shared and put on things, so we want, yeah, that to be.
So
Perfect.
can I ask a question about traffic impact statement? We've got to check now for major preliminary proposed site planning or subdivision. Is there any other scenario where we would want a traffic impact statement?
But it depends how we define minor site plans. For a use variance, if somebody came bifurcating use variance, you might want.
We've had it for variance.
I can imagine waiving that in a lot of applications, but I can also imagine it being very important for.
For
your
if we have a
consideration.
change in use, we would want to have traffic.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
For the
Yeah,
side,
sure.
the side, no,
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to put it in
Yeah,
the
variances.
variances, you have one for Brookings? We had a
What,
report
for-
from Jay.
for Central Station?
Yeah, Central.
We had testimony in traffic. I think we had an impact statement.
He did.
It's something. for that.
Yeah. We've definitely had it from just variances, and I'd rather put it in here and then ask for a waiver from it, and then, as it says, obviously not every application needs that.
But just the variances, right?
I think just de-variance, because I think a C bulk is not.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Central ended up only asking for a C.
No, they needed to do.
No, they changed it. because
They ended up changing
because
the- Because they changed
They
the,
took the extra
ground.
at the end, so it's
Yeah.
only a C, because they weren't
But
voting
it's
for
like-
it.
Didn't they still need it? I'm sorry, I know we just approved it.
Central Station was, it came off from a D to a C, then why were we refused from it? Somebody did. No.
The townhouses were on the first floor.
that was on the first floor, they needed it.
That is the D. yes.
But what I'm saying is,
They took away one of the.
They didn't need a parking.
They didn't
Right,
need
They
the
still need
parking.
the D variance.
They needed the D, they
There
needed
was
the
a
D.
setback, they wanted a setback at the end.
They didn't
They
need
got
the
rid
D.
of that. Yeah. They really cleaned it up to just be use first floor,
Residential.
not parking, not setback.
but
Yep.
it was also a site plan,
Yeah.
and it would have triggered, the
It
traffic
would
would
have
have triggered.
triggered by now in the site.
Standalone use is gonna be a question like, I don't know, like you've been talking about these other ones.
One side of the site.
No, I'm talking about like we had, the adult daycare facility.
Mm.
It was a use question,
Mm.
right? And there was existing building, but the traffic questions were important.
It
So
was.
that's what I'm saying, that's why, that's what I'm saying, standalone D
And
needs to be there.
then they can ask for a waiver if it's irrelevant.
Right.
And decide. All right, that's perfect. Now, I'm gonna make a suggestion that the blue, the next one, moving on to page 4 through 8.
Yeah.
We do at the next meeting.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're all gonna be here too late. Is that okay with everybody?
No objection.
And,
Okay.
but could I ask Bob, just from just a visual perspective, can you justify the check marks onto the boxes? So when you have a very long, in other words, let me give you an example, to be clear. Go to item number W. If I'm reading quickly on item number W, I don't need it. There's no check marks across. So I think it needs to be next to the letter. So, you know what I mean? It just makes it a little easier for the reader.
It's a button on the.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But I think it would help.
We could just have him fill in the boxes rather than check.
That true.
It would just fill up the whole lot. Have a play with what looks good.
Yeah, whatever.
Because ultimately, what's something that's gonna look good, when it's in use,
Mm-hmm.
when it gets sent to somebody, so. Have some fun, find out what works good. Because that then, I'm thinking if we do the next part of the next meeting, that gives Bob
The
an
next
idea of
part
what we
should, the
discussed
next
then.
part is related to plans and that should go on.
Right,
Yeah.
and we're all into the
Yeah,
process
we
now.
know what we're.
Because that's gonna be what I say all the time.
I don't wanna go past 10 if we don't have to. I think it's a natural break. I don't even wanna break.
We do break.
Sorry,
Possibly,
right.
we're there, and reschedule, and maybe give our first shot at taking adjusting the first section, maybe come back to you with a second
Yes.
draft.
Yes. All right, so I was gonna ask, because we've all been talking a lot, but we haven't really heard anything from our friends that are on, our members that are online. Did we miss anything that you want to capture before we finish this section, please? Anybody online, Don, Dennis, Hannah? Anything that we missed?
No, I'm good.
I'll bring up the HPC at the next one.
Well, you already said that to,
Yeah.
but you can add that in.
Yeah.
And then can we say tonight too, is that right?
Yes.
All right, so thank you, Bob and
Lindy.
Lindy, for all your work on this. It's been a really good discussion. Thank you for all the members. We've had a really good group on. Keep moving. All right,
Before we move on,
yes, no.
I have something to add to Renee's report that I forgot. I'm interested in,
Okay.
which is the circle sign.
Yeah.
The circle sign. I had a conversation with our property maintenance officer. So we've gotten in touch with the actual owner of the land. And, we have been assured that within the next couple of weeks, the whole property will be cleaned up at no cost to the borough. And then he is gonna get on top of what's it called, the person who's got the thing in bankruptcy? Whatever that's called.
The receiver.
Exactly, that's it, the receiver, to make sure that they maintain it. So we have 1,200 still in escrow that's ours to use as we need, and so that's that, and they're supposed to be clean.
That is.
Can I piggyback on the mayor's addition with my own addition or something that I forgot? So, I do have something to report to the planning board, and that is, I received, Dennis, you'll be interested, I received the, historic district report from John Hatch for the, potential expansion of the historic district.
Right.
So I have that report. The next step will be basically convert it to a housing plan, or excuse me, much housing these days, historic, preservation element amendments. So I'll do that, and then we'll share with the planning board, and then we'll get ready with notices and do a public hearing. So
So do I need to add that on the agenda? It ties right into my turn. Do I need to add it to the agenda for next time? Or do
yeah,
you wanna-
because that date was it June 11th that we're meeting?
We wanna, we
Yeah.
wanna keep that moving.
I think that would be great, because I can, and Dennis, speak up if you disagree. I'm looking at him, I really can't see me, but, I would turn that into a draft element for the planning board to review
Yeah,
at that meeting, and then if you're satisfied, we can proceed with the adoption process, and if not, we'll do edits.
perfect. We're gonna add that to the agenda for next time.
Right.
So perfect, that ties right into next meeting, June 11th. We've already said we've got the 3 resolutions that we didn't get to do today. We will have the hearing for the RQNC Ironworks. I don't know if I say Ironworks. Assuming they submit in time, that's the plan, that was, and we'll do best things. And we will continue with the land development part of this checklist as well. That'll be on our, I think that seems like a good, agenda.
I am not here
Anything
on
else?
the 11th.
Okay, so if you can send comments.
I
on
was
the
just going to say, if the, in the next section, if there's anything.
Please do, anybody else? that's not
I
here on the
might
phone?
not be here.
Okay,
It might be a flooding thing, I'm not sure.
Sure.
Not an issue.
and when is the environmental commission meeting
It's
next?
supposed to be next week, but it's canceled that well, they had something they wanted to do with the Shade Tree Commission, and the Shade Tree Commission was not available.
Right,
Just go over the trees and talk about.
I mean, you can, but then this thing to tie in with this, I would like their input on what we're doing now.
Melissa, you want to reach out to Chris and ask him about
See if you want-
considering
Well, he wasn't gonna be there anyway.
Oh,
because he had
okay.
a conflict,
okay.
but I can reach out to maybe we can find another meeting between now
I
and.
thought the conference was, he thought it was, the meeting was last week.
No, yes,
It's-
I think, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you could maybe see if they could, you could meet somehow, or at least discuss what we've discussed. Because I would like that. info.
Yeah, I would too, but I think Chris is important because he served on the planning board,
Right,
you know,
absolutely.
and he chose environmental.
But this is our opportunity to capture, I don't
Yeah.
want to go
But
forward
yeah,
without
they
input.
can find another date as long as,
Yeah,
you know.
I'm not sure about that.
Oh, so you're gonna try? Oh, yeah, he's looking upset, worried.
What's that?
I'm not sure about the, about,
over here.
Todd is definitely.
3,
I will
so
be in Europe, so I won't be here.
Where are you going?
Germany and Malta.
Oh, nice.
Okay, all right, so we will be, yeah.
We have all those to do.
All right, so item 15, the bills.
I'll make a motion, we audit the bills.
Second.
Did everybody stand?
No,
Yeah, we need to work on getting them out. If possible.
I don't think that's possible. I mean, I get them, some of them I got today, and when I get here, it's the
Well,
first thing that I do.
Can we
but,
create a cutoff date
Yeah,
that if they're not submitted by Friday?
I think that's difficult because especially for this one, because we don't have another meeting until June 11th. And then it really gets backed up because if there's not enough, I have to get escrow request lists, letters out to these applicants. And right now, the board is very busy and there's a lot of invoices coming in. So I really would rather not.
Oh,
I mean,
tonight.
in the older days, I mean, I would only have the bills sitting here and you would only have them, being passed around.
Pass them down.
It's really no different than at any time.
I'll just look on our thing, our phones, we can't, I see them, you see what I'm saying, we used to have them physically,
Yeah.
pass them down.
I mean, I could certainly get them and have them here.
But we have.
We could do that at the same time.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I have the hard copies, they're all printed out and they're in Bill's mailbox right now.
All right,
So,
and given that they get paid anyway, we are merely auditing the bills, we are not approving them.
Great.
Then it happens whether we see them or not. But then people can vote as they see fit. If they don't feel comfortable, we can vote as such. So we have a motion and a second to audit the bills. Call the roll.
yeah. Mr. Cook,
Yes.
Mr. Dashna.
Yes.
Mayor Carroll,
Same.
Councilwoman Fasaro,
Yes.
Ms. Giffen,
Abstain.
Ms. Weitzman,
Yes.
Mr. Semino,
Yes.
Ms. Swingle.
Yes.
I actually asked Cara if we have need to go into executive session. Mr. Gillian, do you think we have a need? Awesome. Love
Should I want to talk
that.
about Kara? Just asking. Sorry, Kara.
Oh.
Watch it just right now.
it is
Todd.
now.
See online.
Getting punchy.
Yeah. It's not that late.
It's not even 10.
All right, so item 17, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, oh, second?
Second. Oh, puppies, that way.
All in favor?
Aye.
Everybody not in favor? Nobody's not in favor. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
It's been nice meeting you all.
Yeah.
Where's your?
What do you think?